It's 30 out of mile, right?
And then he was talking about, he just wondered what kind of airspace requires mode C.
Everything above Class C. Class C and above.
It's just broader, right?
Yeah. Isn't the mode CVL different at different airports? The size?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a whole section here on
He pulled up the section of Seattle and asked me questions about that.
Oh, Seattle.
About
It is bigger. Makes sense though.
Well, you know where they are.
Alright. 5 o'clock. I'd like to start on time. So, Dylan, good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Alright. So, alright, corrections and clarifications. This one's a little weird one because this correction does not come from something I said in class. It was from your guys' mock orals. I told one of you, METARs and TAFs, all of the ceilings are AGL.
Yeah.
Whoever I stole my questions from, the answer they had for that one was wrong. Okay? So just METARs and TAFs. And you think about it this way. When you look at the METAR, it gives you the ceiling for the airport. So if it's 0900, you're not VFR, and you got to have 1,000 foot. So, but I will always admit when I have something wrong. When I was sitting with one of you, I was like, that does not look right.
It was me.
Yeah, I think it was me
Yeah,
that about
both
that
of
too.
us.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, somebody I'm lying through it. And I'm like, I'm not even asking this question until I look it up. All right. So review. Here's review questions for today. Hey, here's Tristan. What is a standard rate turn?
3 degrees.
30 degrees.
30 minutes.
3 degrees in 1 minute, or
300 degrees in 2 minutes.
it's called a 2-minute turn. All right. So 3 degrees per second, or 2 minutes to make a 360-degree turn.
2 minutes.
Yep. So you make a 180 in 1 minute,
Gotcha.
which is going to become important in today's discussion. All right.
So I was half there.
Yep. How do you recover from a nose-high, unusual attitude? Okay, so let's use words. Okay, so what was that?
Full power, nose down, wings level.
Yeah.
And then coordinate.
Well, on okay. Yes. But you want to fix your ailerons first, right? And then
No.
Power, pitch, and back.
power, pitch.
Pitch first.
Okay.
Bank first when you.
Oh, no. That's right. Yes. I'm on those low.
You're on nose low.
Yes.
So, but
What we got?
I'm actually thrilled that you are having this discussion because it shows me that even if you don't have it quite worked out in your head yet, you know there's a difference. So, yeah, push level. All right, we push the power in, we push the nose over, we level the wings, and then return to your prior heading and altitude. All right, so how do you recover from a nose low unusual altitude?
That's where you roll. You power out, wings level, and then nose back.
Okay. Why the difference?
Because if you pull back while you're not level, it could cause a great rate spiral. Or,
It could cause an accelerated stall resulting in a spin.
result.
So, all right. So, nose low, it's pull, level, pull. So you pull the throttle, level the wings, and then gently pull up. And then return to straight and level flight at the appropriate altitude. All right. Speaking of straight and level, what are the primary instruments for straight and level flight?
Straight. Head indicator. And level. Level 7. At altimeter, yeah, thanks. Altimeter. And attitude.
Okay, so
Well, power. Just expand power.
Oh, pitch bang power. Okay.
Full power.
Would that be airspeed? Power? Yeah, okay.
all right, so for straight and level, so, and let's always go pitch, bank, power. When you study these, do them all pitch, bank, power, pitch, bank, power. Pitch, altimeter. So straight and level, if you can make that little sheet, on the oral, on the written test, you should sit down and draw Rod Machado's little diagram, because then you can just go through, okay, they said level, so altimeter, straight, heading indicator, power for speed, right? right, what are the primary instruments for, I don't know why I put the same question in here twice, so I'm just going to go like that. There we go. What are the primary instruments for established level standard rate turns?
Turn coordinator and
Pitch and power.
pitch. Okay, so
It's gotta be altimeter turn coordinator. For power, you said a straight and level turn.
Mhm.
established.
An established standard rate level turn.
So you need airspeed, right?
Still there.
So airspeed, because you're still.
You're established.
Yeah, don't overcomplicate it.
What would it change to from airspeed? What will the question have to be? What will the
If
if you're climbing or descending?
you're changing speeds,
Okay.
when you change speed, you use the tachometer.
Yeah.
If you're moving a lever, you're going to change your power setting. The rest of the time, if you're trying to maintain a speed, power for speed. All right. So, what are the primary instruments for establishing a level standard rate turn?
Attitude indicator.
Okay. So, and what is the attitude indicator your primary instrument
It's
for?
for pitch and bank. Right?
No,
No.
because you're already in level flight. So, whatever you're changing something,
You go right to your real thing. Alright,
attitude indicator. So for establishing a level standard rate turn, your pitch is still your altimeter. You're supposed to stay level. Now, when you bank, part of banking requires a slight increase in pitch, so you don't descend. All right, but that's for your bank. It's the attitude indicator, and then for power, it's your airspeed indicator. Okay, and the game I want you to play is being able to draw and label the Machado easy-to-use system, and then go through this. Anytime you're changing if you're changing your attitude, you're going to go to the attitude indicator. But if you're changing just to start a turn, but you're trying to stay level, then you're going to still use that level line. Does that make sense? If you're pitching to slow down, all right, as you pitch back and you're raising your nose up, the attitude indicator is primary for pitch. And then, if you want a standard rate climb, it'll switch to be the VSI. Does that make sense? All right, and then for power, we do VSIs at a specific airspeed, so your power is the airspeed indicator. I hammer this a lot because there are a lot of questions that can come up on the written test about this. And it's one of the weird things that until you get it, it's kind of esoteric. But if you've noticed, those of you that have started flying on the TD2, right, those little cues help you reduce where you're looking. You don't have to look at everything. You don't have to look at all 6 instruments, all 8 instruments. You really are only looking at 4 at a time. And it all comes back to the attitude indicator over and over again. And why do we come back to the attitude indicator?
That's where you're supposed to start.
It's where you start. So if you need to make a change. So if you've got a little bit of a climb going, come back to the attitude indicator, and what do? A little bit of pitch down. If your airspeed's too fast, all right, so if you're in a climb and your airspeed's too fast, what do you have to do?
Pitch up.
Full power just a little.
Oh, what's that?
Reduce power some.
Reduce power a
Because
little
you're
bit.
going to climb.
And there's going to be a pitch adjustment that goes with it. All right? So, yep. And then anytime you're making a power change, your manifold pressure and tachometer become primary for power. And then it goes back to, for airspeed, climb, and descent, your primary power instrument is airspeed indicator. All right? Because when you're flying on instruments, you are always trying to fly at a specific airspeed. All right. You may know what the 8 types of spatial disorientation are.
Josh, you got this one.
Is this just the thing we have to know for?
You gotta know this for private too.
Oh yeah, I know this. The the Leans, the Coriolis illusion, the Semonographic illusion, the Graveyard Spin, Graveyard Spiral, Elevator illusion, Inversion illusion, False Horizon, and Autokinesis.
Truth. All right.
Yeah.
There is actually an acronym for this.
Oh, of course there is.
Ice flags.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Ice flags.
Because that makes perfect sense.
So, well, if you got disorientation, it's ice flags. There's flags for it. So that's the reason that I made the slide all wonky and lopsided. And so, and the Leans is also called Graveyard, not Spiral. What was the other one?
Graveyard Spin and Leans are the same thing.
So, yeah, there's not the Spiral.
Spin.
Yes. So your answer was correct, but the Leans and the Graveyard Spin are the same
I
thing.
like this. They have sense.
Okay, so, and this is absolutely something you should know for your private, is not just this list, but what each of them means. I'm not going to run down them all right now.
And where to find the answer if I don't.
Exactly, and where do you find it?
I don't know. They're going to be in there somewhere. They're in the far aim. So I think I have them marked. But...
So they're probably in the P.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
the saving throws.
Yeah.
So, but the big thing is it's when your body lies to you. All right. As a private pilot, you care about them. As an instrument pilot, they can be the difference between life and death. And so when you start to feel something and you're trying to figure out why you feel like the plane is doing something other than you think it's doing, and you've lost your visual cues, humans have evolved. We get a substantial amount of information from our eyes. When you lose those visual cues, the rest of your body starts lying to you. And so you've got to learn to trust your instruments. And this all leads to trusting your instrument. All right. So, tonight, we're going to do 2 chapters, chapter 6 and 7. Chapter 6 is on instrument holds, and chapter 7 is on the IFR system as a whole. There's a little bit of history. All right. So, why do we hold?
ATC instructs.
Because you got to wait for something. Okay. What kinds of things do we end up waiting for? Okay, traffic. Weather.
Something on the ground that's delayed their landing.
Yep. So, dead deer on the runway. Actually happens.
Not on the guarded deer.
Yep.
Flat tires
on the taxiway.
Flat tire.
Flat tire on the runway. Aircraft with the gear up landing. And so they're going to put you somewhere. Also, sometimes the airport's just busy and they need to slow down traffic, so they got to stick you somewhere. You can't stop. So, yeah. So, they'll have you hold to adjust spacing. Sometimes they'll have you do just one turn in a hole, because that puts you 4 minutes behind the guys in front of you. Maybe 6, depending on how you enter the hole. Usually, they'll give you a hold. If it's just for spacing, they'll give you a hold that's an easy direct entry. So you just do 4 minutes around the circle. All right. Lost communications. If you lose communications, we're going to talk about this more later, but one of the things you have to be prepared to do is you fly to the last fix en route before you get to the approach, and then you're going to turn in circles until your estimated time of arrival, so that you can arrive at a time that the FAA, that the ATC is expecting you to come in, because they will clear out any traffic that was going to be a potential problem for you. There's a little bit down the road here, but what approach do you do when you fly into an airport and your lost comms?
I don't know. They're not using the light gun on you, so I'll say that much.
GPS. Because if you lose your comms, well, I guess your nav.
Your nav could still be working, but so what approach do you use? Just think to it logically. I'm flying along. I've lost my comms. So what am I squawking?
7600.
7600. So they know I don't have any comms. All right, and we're flying into Spokane. Anybody got ForeFlight handy?
The air relay.
Just how many approaches are there into Spokane?
One, correct?
Probably 2, because they have the 2 different languages.
There's a lot.
Could you just tell me how many?
Here, I'll pull it up.
I just want to know how many there are. I'll teach you how to look them up on ForeFlight later.
Under IFR.
If you look,
There's 3.
there weren't
Oh,
three.
that's departure for drivers.
Yep. Go to approaches.
1, 2,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
There's a
7,
lot.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
22 approaches that you can possibly take into Spokane. The reason there's so many is that you can fly into Spokane. There's 2 intersecting runways, so that's 4 different runways, and there's you've got ILS approaches on some of the runways. You've got GPS approaches to almost, I think all 4 of the runways have GPS approaches. There's VOR approaches. So you have all these different options based on the equipment that you may or may not have in your aircraft. All right. So how do you decide what approach to use when you can't tell ATC what you're doing?
Sorry, the approach without the radio that's on their
Hmm?
option list.
What's that?
The approach without the radio on their option list. I'm sure they have.
Way simpler than that.
Straight easiest one?
Anyone that works. You pick. You do, because what they do, if you're lost comms and you're coming in, nobody else is allowed to fly into that airspace until you're on the ground.
Yeah.
Period. They will take all those 747s and where will they be doing?
Holding pattern.
Holding patterns outside of the area where you're going to be. Now, they're going to hope that you do something that makes logical sense and you fly in on the when you're supposed to. But
So I had a question about that. In today's world with our phones and everything, would the correct thing be to do if you can't call in?
yeah, there is absolutely no reason not to. And in fact, who did I do that with? While we were, one of you, I called 1-800 Weather Brief while we were sitting in your mock oral. It might have been with James, is that his name?
James Carey. Yeah.
James Carey. And when you dial 1-800 Weather Brief, the very first thing that comes up,
I remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
it
very
was-
first thing is if the radio's out, then
if your radio's out, what do?
press something.
Press 9.
Yeah.
Option number 9. That is the first thing they tell you when you call 1-800 Weather Brief.
Can they deviate from your flight plan, your filed flight plan at that point?
If you are in communication with them on a cell phone, probably. What I would say is once you're talking to them, though, they're mostly going to want to know what you plan to do. Because your job is to get down safely.
Lost comms does not constitute an emergency, correct?
It does not. It is, however, a serious situation. And we're going to run, later class, we're going to run through an excruciatingly detailed process for how you figure out how to deal with lost comms. What I want you to think through, though, is what I just told you is it's all set up around the idea that you have to get on the ground safely. What do you think the first number 1 option is if you lose comms when you're flying along and you're on an IFR flight plan?
Turn them off and turn them back on.
That is a troubleshooting technique that may or may not be acceptable. Okay, so what if you're cruising along, you're on an IFR flight plan, but you're in VFR weather and your comms crapped a bit?
Turn the radio.
7600. Oh yeah, just switch VFR. Yeah.
Go 7600 and fly VFR to the nearest place that you can land. You know? Continue VFR, and then when you get on the ground, pick up a phone and call somebody. All right. So the other reason you might ask for a hold is if you're having an issue with something and you need time to deal with it. If you learn how to fly a hold well, especially if you tell them, hey, can I get a hold with 2-minute legs? Because then all of a sudden, instead of just being 4 minutes around, it's 6 minutes around, and you get 2 minutes of straight and level, 2 minutes of straight and level. You can also, in some instances, request a vector, and they'll just give you a straight line to fly while you sort out whatever the problem is. So you can just set your heading bug, turn on your autopilot, and figure out what the problem is. All right. So holding pattern. Everybody on this side of the room has done the racetracks. Have you done the racetracks yet? On the simulator?
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't done the racetrack. We just did the.
We just did the worksheet?
Yeah.
Okay. So, the next exercise for you then is to do racetracks. And that is, you'll fly in one direction for a minute, you'll turn for a minute, you'll fly for a minute, you'll turn for a minute, and then you'll fly for a minute. And once you do that, that's one loop. Now, the only real difference between that racetrack is this intersection, navigate, or fix. The way they're going to describe these things. So, old school, they were almost always on a VOR or an NDB. So,
This just feels like something you should know as a private pilot too. You know, like for if you're stuck in weather.
well, if you're a private pilot and you're stuck waiting for weather, you have to stay in VFR.
Right. I mean, if you're stuck a guy in clouds, right?
But you just fly around in circles.
Yeah.
So, the reason in the clouds they do this. All right. So this is going to be our fix. We'll use GEG.
You wouldn't use GEG for a holding pattern.
They might. FAA might.
What's GEG?
So GEG is the VOR at Spokane.
Oh, that's on the field though, isn't it?
No, it's not.
It's not actually on the field, but it's okay. Like Coeur d'Alene's is right on the field. COE, there's a VOR right on the field. They'll put you in a holding pattern at 10,000 feet above the field, just going around in circles. So once you understand this with a VOR, all the rest of them start to make sense. The VOR is oddly easier to explain because you understand what a radial is off of a VOR already. All right. So you will always have a fix. All right. And then there will always be the inbound leg. All right. The inbound leg is going to be on a VOR. It's a radial from the VOR. So I'll do a super simple one here. If we're going to hold on this 090 radial from the VOR, what direction are we going to be flying if we hold on the VO? If we're going to have this be our fix,
To rest, right?
we're going to be flying a heading of 270 because we're going to hold on the 090 radial. All right, and it will say hold east of Geiger or hold east of Spokane VOR on the 090 radial. So you are going to end up with the majority of your time on the east side. The standard direction of turns is to the right. So you fly in, you'll get the Geiger. Now, if you had a direct entry, say we were just flying on 090, we'll talk about types of entries here in a minute. But you're flying in. When you get to Geiger, that's going to be the 6 T's.
Turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, track.
Okay. So we're going to turn 180 degrees to the right. We're going to start a 1 minute timer. Turn, top, twist. You're going to adjust any of your heading bugs, OBSs, anything that needs to be twisted. And you're going to turn, and you got, the 1 minute. And then at 1 minute, you should be at 180 degrees, and you're going to go wings level. You should, in theory, be abeam the fix. Is that making sense so far? Okay. So I'm going to erase part of this, because we're going to draw some other things in here real quick. But, so you're beam the fix, and then you're going to fly, how long? 1 minute. At the end of 1 minute, you're going to start a 180 degree turn to the right. You come around, and if there's no wind, you'll get here, and this will take 1 minute. All right? And that's the basis of your racetrack. All right? If they want you to turn to the left, I'm going to back up real quick. So you turn to the right. This area is called the protected side. All right? They have surveyed this, and they know that at certain speeds, if you stay within this space, you won't hit anything. All right? And if you're going faster than certain speeds, if your aircraft won't go lower than 200 knots, they may make you hold at a higher altitude. I think 6,000. That slide's going to come up later. But as long as you stay on the protected side and within the general area that's protected, you are good. All right? Sometimes terrain doesn't let them turn you to the right, so they'll make you do a turn to the left. If they do that, when they give you the holding clearance, they will specifically say left turns. But if they don't say left turns, what direction do we turn?
Right.
There we go. Okay.
So it's like the opposite of just a normal traffic pattern.
It is.
It's that reason. Because if you're in
Well, the reason the traffic pattern, so why is the traffic pattern left turns normally?
it's because you're on the left
to
side.
see.
It's easier to see from the left side.
Yeah.
Why they made right turns for holds in the sky, I don't know.
We're not being visual, is it?
You're not in visual.
Yeah.
Well, in theory, you're not in visual. Okay. So the inbound leg, this is the actual line you're going to hold on. With the fix, the inbound leg defines the hold. And with a VOR, you want to strive to make this perfect to establish wind corrections and adjustments. Okay. So if you're flying to the fix, and in order to keep the needle centered on your CDI, you have to put a crab in. You want to make a mental note of what that crab is. How many degrees left or right are you having to point the nose to stay on our line? All right. Okay, so if I have to crab this way 10 degrees, later we're going to flip that around. Now the book in one place says to use double the crab correction. So instead of 20 degrees instead of 10 degrees, turn 20. In another place it says to use 3 times. You're better off using 3 times. Your pattern is not going to be perfectly oval anymore. You're going to actually fly out and then fly back in like this, and then you'll turn. Why do we do it that way?
Because it's okay if you are too close, but you can't be too far out.
Exactly. And our CDI can identify this line. It can't identify anything out here. Okay? Now, on a GPS with a moving map, you can kind of see stuff. People fly much prettier holds with a moving map. But the fact is, you want to stay inside the protected area. So if you turn this way and you put too much wind correction in, if you put way too much in, you'll blow through this line. All right? But you're only going to fly this way for 1 minute. All right? If you've got a wind coming directly along the line, you'll just adjust the amount of time you fly this way. If it takes 1 minute and 15 seconds to fly to here, you'll take 15 seconds off going this way. You'll only fly 45 seconds, and then when you turn back, it'll take you 1 minute. All right? If it takes you 45 seconds, when you turn this way, the next time, you'll go 1 minute and 15 seconds. So, it's not complex math. It's literally exactly the same. Whatever the problem is, add or subtract that to your outbound leg, and you want your inbound leg to be 1 minute, because then it's easier to adjust if you need to hit a certain time off of the hold. Okay? So wind correction, and these slides are coming up later, all right? But you want to strive to make sure you got perfect wind correction on the inbound leg, because that's the one where your needle is telling you that you're on the line. And if you're on a VOR, it's where the 2 from flags going to flip and tell you exactly when you cross over. So all of your timers will work better if you reset them when you cross over the fix.
Gotcha. So when your 2 from flag flips, you start your timer, then you're ready.
It's called the first full positive reversal.
Because it's the only indicator you have.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But it is going to flip every single time you come over this, and then it will flip it'll flip out here when you're going back. In theory, that flip should happen when you're directly abeam. But if you're doing 180 degree standard rate turns, and then you just add in the number of degrees. So if you do a 1 minute turn and you need to put 10 degrees of deflection in, all right. So you do 3 more seconds. 1 minute and 3 seconds will get you 9 degrees. Yep.
Where do you see how many degrees your crab?
You know what your course line should be. In this case, to keep everything centered, you should be flying 090, right?
Okay, gotcha.
But if you have to, if the needle's moving on you, you make a correction. That establishes the crab, and then you just see what the difference is between 090.
Yeah, whatever your crab.
That's your crab. That's your wind correction angle. All right.
It's a really simple way to figure that out.
Yeah. And I guess the whole thing, all that matters is keeping that 90, 1 minute, and straight.
If you can stay for 1 minute on this 90 line, everything else you can fix. Okay? So, now, again, you're not, I'm sorry, and I said 90. You're on the 90 radial, you're flying a heading of 270.
Yeah.
All right? So, and remember, radials go from the nav aid, headings are the direction you are going. All right, so there'll always be a point, a nav aid, a fixer, a waypoint. Now, I told you, these are easier to understand if you think of them as VORs, because that's what we use, because we're used to VORs having radials, right? They can have you hold at any waypoint, any place that is defined. In fact, technically, they can give you a point in space if they give you a way to identify that point in space. Like they can tell you to hold on the 090 radial 5 miles before guided. And then you have to have DME or a GPS, and then you do the hold. All right? You have to know how to do that. The odds of doing it are extremely low in the modern system. Does that make sense?
If they were to give you something like that, that say we covered that in this class, and then 5 years from now, never having done it, somebody gives us that, and we're like, we just can't remember how to do it. Can you tell them you're not capable of doing that?
You could say unable, and you want to go that route before you do something just radically dangerous. But you're supposed to within every 2 years you'll get either an IPC instrument proficiency check, or you're going to stay current and you're supposed to practice holds. So you should be able to do it. That said, it's tricky because you don't do it very often, and again, it's super unusual for them to give those kind of instructions at this point.
Is that because some planes can't do that? So they don't have, if they don't have those two things, they don't.
But almost every plane nowadays has GPS.
Yeah.
So,
If it's a VFR GPS,
no VFR, but then you can't use that as part of filing to fly. So in theory, you can fly around with a VOR and no DME, no GPS. So then you would say unable. I do not have the ability to identify that location. Does that make sense?
yeah.
So you have better idea is to learn how to fly it.
Yes.
But yeah, if they give you an instruction that you are unable to comply with, say the words unable, and just ask for a different hold. And like I said, most of the time they're not going to try to give you something super, super screwy. All right. So we talked about inbound. Outbound leg keeps you in the protected space and allows you to adjust and correct for wind. So the outbound leg is always flown exactly the opposite way. So flying this hold, where should I have my heading bug? If I have a heading bug.
270.
270. Have your heading bug set for the inbound leg. Do you sit there and spin the heading bug around? No, because you'll drive yourself crazy and forget what you're doing. The other thing is, if you set the heading bug right, you know when you're on the inbound, and it's easier to keep track of how many turns you've made in the loop. Also, you are always going to depart on an inbound leg. You will always depart crossing over your fix. Even if they have you go a slightly different heading, you'll always go over your fix and then depart. All right. So we talked about timing the leg, 1 minute, no wind. All right, adjustments to the pattern. And just to show you that I actually knew what I was saying here, all you do if the wind is exactly along your course, if the wind's giving you a headwind, it'll take you more than a minute to get in. So you're just taking that tailwind on the other side, and you just, whatever the difference is, subtract it from your flight. And if you got a headwind going in, you got to fly out further so that you can make up for that difference. All right. Adjustment for leg length is just to take the difference from a 1 minute inbound leg and apply it to the outbound leg. Drift correction. If you're getting blown off course, 2 to 3 times the wind correction necessary to maintain your straight line on your inbound, and that'll give you this oval shape. And you just tweak it as you go. If you do it right, you end up with, takes almost always 4 minutes to do a normal 1 minute leg pattern. All right. So we also talked about inbound, outbound. So there's 1 minute. I may have another slide that comes up. You can also be told to do DME leg lengths or GPS leg lengths. So instead of flying for 1 minute straight, you fly for 5 miles or 7 miles, whatever that leg length is.
If you have a GPS and a DME, how do you know which one to use?
Pick either one; they're going to come out the same.
DME is different than GPS.
It is, except so if it's a GPS charted approach and they're expecting you to use GPS lengths, this protected area makes up for that small difference that you get in slant range at the altitude that you're at, because you're going to be holding far enough away. So anybody know what the rule is for slant range distance where the error is considered negligible?
Beyond a mile. Right?
Almost. Do you know the answer to this one?
I don't.
Okay.
A mile and 1,000 feet?
1 mile for every 1,000 feet that you are AGL. So if you are 6,000 feet AGL and you are 6 miles from the DME, your slant range difference is so small it's considered negligible. All right. So, and if you do that, like if you do the math, if you're 6,000 feet up, if you're straight above and you're 6,000 feet up, you're going to be 1 mile. Your DME is going to read 1 mile. If you're 12,000 feet straight up, it's going to read 2 miles. Well, if you're 12 miles away this way, it's going to read like 12.3 miles. I'd have to do the math.
So if you're doing a hold over your VOR DME,
If you're directly over the VOR, you don't need DME at all, because this will be 0.
but if they give you leg lengths,
If they give you leg lengths, but again, you will be in you'll be in the contained area whether you use a GPS or not. They're not exactly the same.
how do you use your DME then if it's giving you straight up to do leg lengths?
Consider 1 to be 0, or 2, if you're at 12,000 feet, 2 to be 0. I think I got another graphic that's going to come.
I have a quick question on the wind stuff.
Okay.
I think it was that back. Yeah. That one there. Will your turns be, I mean, I take it they will be different times on something like that. Like your
So you
will be.
You're going to go 180 degrees. Well, if you need 10 degrees of wind correction, you're going to go 190 degrees. So instead of 1 minute, you'll do 1 minute and 3 seconds.
Okay.
You're 100% correct.
Makes
Yes.
sense.
So, and the whole point is you want to come back into. So now, if the wind correction, so like if the wind's coming from the other direction, I don't have a good drawing of this. But so in this, it shows that the wind is coming from the inbound leg towards the outbound leg. If it's coming the other way, you're going to correct the other way. Yeah, so you want to stay in the protected area.
Yeah.
So, but the general rule is if you just apply whatever direction you pointed the nose to stay on your inbound line, when you turn around, triple that wind correction, and that'll blow you back in, and you'll be good.
So your time would be shorter though, right?
Don't overthink that. As long as you come out with a 1 minute leg going toward the thing, if you're going in, so if you're crabbed in and it takes you 1 minute and 15 seconds to get there, all right, what do we say? You took too long, so you're going to subtract 15 seconds from the outbound leg. So you're going to turn around and you'll fly for 45 seconds with 3 times the wind correction angle and then come in. And then when you come in and it'll take you 58 seconds. Okay, well then you were 2 seconds too long. So then you just adjust. But you want to the goal is 1 minute. You're probably only going to do 2 or 3 turns in a hold most of the time, unless there's been a major emergency or something like that. Also, if you start doing turns and you're on like your 3rd turn in a hold, you maybe need to ask what's going on and consider a diversion to another airport. Because if it's going to take them that long to clean things up, you aren't the only plane that's stacked up.
Mm-hmm.
So
you could be holding for quite a while longer.
Oh yeah, there's documented aircraft crashes from guys holding so long that they ran out of fuel and failing because that. So 2 steps. 1, minimum fuel. Anybody heard that call?
Mm-hmm.
Is minimum fuel an emergency?
No.
Nope. What's minimum fuel?
It's not emergency. It's just something that the airport should take action on and probably give the guy a little bit more clear.
Let's ATC know that unless action is taken, it could become an emergency. All right. And then I have a fuel emergency. You have now declared an emergency, and they have to deal with you.
What do you declare a fuel emergency? Is it before you run out of fuel or once you run out of fuel?
Before you run out of fuel.
So once you hit minimum fuel, how long are you away?
So before you hit minimum fuel, you are in a fuel emergency. Your minimum fuel to get to an airport that you can reasonably expect to land at. So what are the fuel planning requirements for VFR? For IFR. For IFR. IFR. You're close.
It's all 2 destination alternates and 45 minutes
At cruise power.
at cruising power. So
All right. So if you are to the point where you can't reach an airport and cruise for 45 minutes after that, you're at declared emergency state.
because you still have to go to your new airport.
You got to get to your new
You may
airport.
not go in instantly, so you can't have exactly enough to make it there. You
Well, exactly. And you might miss.
Right. Yeah.
There might be a missed approach. You need some.
So then, how do you know what your? I guess it's personal. You set your minimum. What you say your minimum fuel is.
So you figure that out, but you base it off of the concept, and it will change while you're flying.
Yeah.
This is one of those calculations. If you get stuck in a hold for a long time, you're going to turn around and say, "Hey, I have done the calculation." You have to make the decision when it has become an emergency. But a good rule of thumb is to say, I have to be able to fly from where I'm at to an airport where I think I can land, and for 45 minutes after that. And that's when I would be like, nope, this is now an emergency. I have to get to an airport that I think I can land at. All right. Above 14,000 feet MSL, the standard is 1.5 minute leg lengths. Partly it's because planes are going faster. When you get into a hold, you are 3 minutes before you enter the hold, you are allowed to start slowing down. You want to go slow. Some of you guys, when we practiced the racetracks, I made you do them at different speeds. You should very deliberately be able to slow the plane down, cut your fuel burn down. There is no reason to just be chugging through gas. You're not going anywhere. There's no point to not go anywhere fast.
You're on a racetrack.
And you're still going to go it's still going to be 4 minutes every circle. You're just not going to go as far.
Yeah.
Smaller circles.
So it'd be smart to do a holding pattern slow flight.
Almost.
And in some cases, if you slow down enough, they might tell you to cancel the hold because you've
You've solved the problem already for them. So,
It'll probably take you less loops in the pattern in a hold if you're going slow anyway. Yeah.
okay. And in fact, there are maximum holding speeds at different altitudes. I should have these memorized. I don't. Partly because I'm not going to hold at 200 knots anyway. So I'm always below these. Well, even in my 340, I can do 205 knots at 75% power. I don't hold at 205 knots. I hold at about 100 knots. I pull that, which is almost slow flight for my plane. You pull everything down. The only reason that you don't slow down like super drastically is you don't want to super cool the engines. All right, so you'll ease it down, but you're in the hold. There's nothing that says you can't keep slowing down. You know, as the engine stabilizes, pulling a little more power. You can, in theory, put in flaps. I wouldn't. That generally doesn't happen. Typically, you might have 12. 3 laps is 12 minutes. If you're spinning for more than 12 minutes, there's an issue. But if you pull power back, look at a 172 running at max power. You're burning what, almost 8 gallons of fuel?
I would say like 9.
Okay, so not 9. But if you throttle back to 55%, you're burning what?
7.5.
At 55%? I think you're closer to like 6.
You were talking Bravo Tango or 6.5?
Right, you get it. But so what I'm getting at is you've got almost a 50% fuel use reduction. You can save an hour's worth of gas in 3 turns. Does that make sense? So you want to slow down. All right. My math may be a little off there. I'm doing math in public, but you can save a substantial amount of fuel by reducing your power and leaning thoroughly, appropriately. All right. So, but for the written test, you will need to know 200 knots at 6,000 and below. 6,001 to 14,000, it's 230 knots, and above that, it's 265 knots. All right? And I do definitely...
This might be a dumb question, but what if you're in an aircraft that's not capable of flying slower than 265?
Then you have a conversation with ATC, and they will probably move you up, and they will clear you to fly the hold faster. Other than military aircraft, 265, like I said, that's half the speed of a commercial airline. I mean, they fly at 500 knots routinely. The other thing is they're not getting holds very often.
Yeah.
Passengers don't like getting banked around.
They probably have their own rules for that kind of stuff. When they have
Well, they're also called scheduled air carriers for a reason. You'll get hold up so that they can make their schedule. All right. So DME mileage legs can also refer to GPS mileage legs. Note the one significant difference. You brought it up. The difference is slant range. The big thing is to understand that that 12-mile DME, if they tell you to hold 12-mile DME, you'll hold it 12 miles. If that's what you get on your GPS, you'll use your GPS. It's close enough. But if they tell you to hold at a location and do 5-mile legs, you have to know that for every 1,000 feet, or for every 6,000 feet, you're 1 mile off. So if you're holding it 2 mile at 12,000 feet, your 0 becomes 2. And so you'll do 2 to 7. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's see. So in this example, we're going to talk about when they give you a hold clearance, they're going to tell you how to get to the hold course, how to get to the hold point, how you're going to hold, and then when to expect further clearance. All right. So in this case, Cessna 2132 Bravo, radar contact 1 mile north of Hofed, intersection. Cleared to RAPS intersection via heading 340 degrees, intercept Victor 244, direct RAPS, hold east on Victor 244, left turns, maintain 8,000 feet, expect further clearance at 0230. All right, times will always be Zulu time. Excuse me.
Bless you.
All right, thank you. All right, what did we do?
Yeah, you think about our ATC now sounded like it at mouthful, so.
Okay, so that sounded really rough. They will rattle all that off pretty quick. First of all, they'll tell you prepare a copy. I have holding instructions for you, so you get out a pen. So number 1, you'll write it down. So how about everybody get out a pen? All right, Cessna 2132 Bravo.
Don't write down your camera.
You are 2132 Bravo.
But I mean, like, if they say that, don't write it down because it's right in front of you.
It should be on a sticker in front of you. Yeah, you'll learn to take notes quickly. So, radar contact 1 mile north of Hofed intersection. Cleared to Raps intersection via heading 340 degrees. Intercept Victor 244 direct Raps. Hold east on Victor 244 left turns. Maintain 8,000 feet. Expect further clearance at 0230. 0230.
You lost me like half the way through that.
What's that?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I got lost like halfway.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what did you actually say?
Could you repeat that?
No, it's
Standby.
not standby. What do you want to repeat something ATC? What do you say?
So if
You say,
old instructions, Cessna 2132.
If you can't remember the proper way to say it, say whatever you have to say to get an answer.
But
What do we say?
Repeat, please.
Actually, the appropriate way to say it is say again.
Oh.
Say again. ATC 2132 Bravo. Say again. All
We
right.
also have sheets like this that you
Oh.
can fill out, like on your iPad when you're flying,
Nice.
like specifically for holds.
So did you get it all?
Where is that in ForeFlight?
So that's on Scratchpad.
Scratch pad. Nice. And then there's
So did you find the hole?
holding. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Cessna 2132 Bravo. Radar contact 1 mile north of Hofed intersection. Cleared to Raps intersection via heading 340 degrees. Intercept Victor 244 direct Raps. Hold east on Victor 244, left turns, maintain 8,000 feet. Expect further clearance at 0230.
I got like 50% of that now.
Is that?
So I got like 50% of that.
Okay. So the first part, so they call you. So you should just be hair triggered to the minute you hear your call sign that you're listening and paying attention. All right. And the first thing they do is say, "This is where you are." All right. So they say radar contact 1 mile north of Hofed intersection.
You don't gotta write that because that's just where you are.
It's where you are, but you do want to make sure it's where you actually are, in case there is some sort of weird radar anomaly or ADSB's acting up. If they tell you you're someplace you are not, then you say,
Either you have it wrong or they have it wrong.
Yeah.
Either way, is
correction.
Yeah.
I am 10 miles south of Hofed intersection, or blah, blah, blah. Because they may have got the wrong, sometimes on the radar overlay, if you're stacked on top of somebody, they may have the wrong person. All right. So that's the first thing, is they want to make sure you are where they think you are. You are expected to try to check that. All right. So then it says cleared to Raps intersection. So that's Raps. Okay, but we're flying this way right now. So they give us a heading, 340. What is that plane doing in this case?
Heading to Raps intersection.
No, but right now, look at the plane.
Yeah.
So what heading am I actually flying right now? Look at my plane.
North-ish?
Yeah, I am more like 010. I'm definitely not 360 because I'm not pointing straight up. So 340 is going to be like a little bit of a left turn.
Well, isn't it in magnetic though? Like you're gonna be in magnetic, so magnetic north is gonna be skewed.
Yeah, don't overthink that.
Gotcha.
But you are going to.
Is that CDI that's supposed to be representing the plane?
Yeah, because that's the CDI is already at 3-4.
Yeah, I don't know if that's supposed to be like right this second.
Oh.
They've actually got that dialed to 250. Oh, no, it's stand corrected. No, it's on 340. But bottom line is, you're going to end up, I'm going to guarantee they have you make a little bit of a left turn because they want you to intercept that course. So this is Victor 244, and they want you to go this way. So we're going to head west.
That's why they say
So
cleared Victor 244.
So you're going to turn, and they're going to put you on an angle. Typically, it's about 30, it's somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees, so that you intercept at an angle. And you're going to fly from here, kind of like this, until you hit the line. And then as your CDI should be set up like this one, where they have it set on 068 radial. Remember that? So this little bar will start coming in, and when the bar comes in, you get to turn to the left automatically, as you were told. Cleared to RAPS intersection via heading 340, intercept Victor 244. So you're going to hit 244, and then you're going to fly this way to RAPS. All right? Now.
Victor 244 being the VOR radial we want us to go?
Quick question on that. V24 is just a VFR.
Okay, so we're not fly
Yeah, so this Victor 244, that is a VOR derived radio.
Oh, that is it.
Yeah, but they're all called Victor Airways.
Okay.
Below 18,000 feet. Above 18,000 feet, they're called Juliet.
So you're heading on 244 radial, which is the opposite of the radial you're going to be making your whole pattern on.
So 6'8".
So 6'8's the radial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 6'8.
Yeah.
So our heading
Yeah.
is going to be
240.
add 180 to it.
Yeah.
So, and since I can't do that fast in my head, it's 248.
Yeah.
So, but you can see 6'8. It's on the tail.
So that you're not
There you go.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Question on the scratch pad holding clearance. What do we put there?
Radial or course.
This is my scratch pad.
So in this case, what they said to do was Victor 244. So your radial is 068. Your course is 248. Is that what the math came out with? I can't do 180 math in my head.
244.
No, it's 240.
4.
So, all right. So step one, you got called. All right. So step two, you're going to turn to 340 degrees. You're going to tune the nav radios. So, because we're going to need 116.0 in the nav radio, we're going to identify the Morse code. All right. So you're going to turn to 340. You're going to tune the nav radios. You're going to identify the VOR. Oh, there we go. I didn't put it in here. You're going to set the CDI to 248 degrees. You're going to intercept 244, and you're going to make a left turn and go to RAPS. All right. So,
Why is 244 off of your radial that you need to be on? Or the heading, the heading that you need to be on.
the heading is just the reciprocal of the radial.
So why did they tell you to intercept V244?
Victor 244 because it's big and labeled on the map.
Okay.
It's easy to find.
Gotcha.
Also, modern GPSs. So 430s, I don't think you can put Victor Airways in, but like a G1000 or an IFD, you can literally put the airway in, just Victor 144, and it'll find it.
So once you get to 244, then you fix
No,
your heading
244.
to 248. Once you're on.
Yeah. So see, they've already set that head. They've already set that course here, and then your heading is set here. So you're going to fly up here, and then when you get close to the line, this will start coming in. Weird little trick if you're flying with an HSI. If you start the turn and lead the turn in, if you set this course to 248, you'll be able to just lead it in. You just turn and keep the heading bug right above the lever line. All right.
If
So
they don't say anything about altitude, just hold altitude.
then we'll say something about altitude. But yeah, generally, you almost always hold at the same altitude unless they very specifically tell you that you're going to change altitude in the hold. They do that. There's instructions for missed approaches that very often you have to climb in the hold or descend. And then there's some inbound procedures where you have to descend in the hold because you just can't get down low enough without running into something. All right. So here we got turn, time, twist, throttle, talk, track. So turn, tune, identify, set your CDI to 248 on the 068 radial, intercept Victor 244, left turn to wraps. All right. Now you want to find that fix on the chart. First thing you're doing is just complying with all their instructions. So you're going to change your heading and all that, get set up, and then you're going to have to look on the chart. Now this is one of the times when having an autopilot is super, super helpful, but you should be able to fly the heading and hold the heading. So you're going to find the fix. You're going to draw the inbound leg. All right, I'm going to go back here. So we're on Victor 244. They said you're going to hold on 244. Now, one of the nice things here is that line is already drawn on the map. All right? So you're holding somewhere on this line. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Your inbound leg is going to be on that line. Do you remember what the clearance was? The hold clearance? Hold.
It was left turn.
East, yeah.
Hold east of wrap. Hold east on Victor 244. So Victor 244 is only a line that goes through here. This is your hold point. If you draw a line through here, which half of Victor 244 is on the east side? Right here. Okay? This is the trickiest part of this whole thing that people screw up all the time. You're going to hold east on wraps. All right.
That's why they said left turns, because if you did right turn, you don't hold east turn.
Well, no, so if I come in here and I get to wraps and I make a left turn, which way am I going?
Left turn. You go down.
Otherwise known as?
Well, south.
South. All right. If I came in here and I did a right turn at wraps, which way would I hold?
North.
North. All right.
It's going to stay east.
Still holding east.
Yeah,
You're still holding east. East with right turns would be east and to the north. East with left turns is east and to the south. Okay? So, all right.
So essentially your inbound leg is on the east side.
Mm-hmm. So you draw the fix, draw the inbound leg, determine the proper side of the hold, draw the first turn, and then you can complete the whole path. All right? So this is it. 2 choices for inbound legs. So A or B. Which one we say it was?
B.
Because we're holding east. All right. I don't know. Wait. All right, and then you complete the holding pattern. You figured out it was on the east side. You figured out it was left turns, and you have a holding pattern. All right.
And you're holding that far away from the VOR. What did they say? Is there a reason for that? They said something, right?
They told me to hold on wraps.
Okay.
So your point was
Wraps.
you're starting over in wraps.
If you're using a GPS, that's pretty easy. If you don't have a GPS,
That's hard because then what you have to do is you have to use one VOR to figure out, so the map's not.
You have to use those 2 VORs.
Yeah.
and if you don't have dual
So you see this MCA up here? Yeah, if you don't have dual, dudes used to do this with one VOR. They would literally sit there and spin and tune and spin and tune. So you get on the line, get your heading going, and then you tune in the other VOR. Now flip-flops made it easier because you just have the 2 frequencies in and you pop them back and forth. We'll do it in the simulator for you at some point. Have you try to find an intersection using one VOR. It can be done. It is tricky. All right, and you got to be on your game. So, all right, holding pattern strategy. What's the fix and the radial bearing or airway or course on which I am to hold? They will say it in different ways. You just need to understand they're always going to be defining a line that goes through that fix. They will almost always use a line that's on the map because it's easier for you to find it. All right.
But they don't want to deal with you getting lost because that's the workload.
Yeah, but they also expect you to know how to fly the plane.
Well, and if they don't use a line on the map, they got to make something up.
Yeah.
So if they
So-
see when you're on, there you go.
Sometimes there's what's called a charted hole. It's drawn on the map, the actual hole. All right, but so what are the 2 possible choices of inbound legs? Which inbound leg is on the side of the intersection or fix specified in the holding pattern? you can only go into and they will always give the side in one of the 8 cardinal directions. You probably all learned there were 4 cardinal directions. There are 8.
Was it northwest, southwest? Okay.
Yep. So north, northwest, west,
Oh.
north, northwest, west, southwest, south, southeast, east, northeast. You're back to north. All right. But they're always going to give it that way. There will only be one direction that heads to the fix that's on the right side. And eventually you won't have to actually draw these. For now, bust out your iPad, open up your map, and actually draw it on there. All right, and then is it right or left? If you know the inbound leg and you know left or right, you can draw the rest of the pattern.
And you can draw on your map in 4 foot.
Yep.
If it did say hold east of wraps and then right, but they didn't clarify left-hand pattern, you should realize that yourself because he said hold east.
Mm-hmm. And so there would be right-hand patterns, and they would go to the north. All right. How are we doing? Oh, 1806. Okay. So holding pattern entries. This is one, I don't know, for some reason this seems to be like the hardest thing for people to get. And for the written test, it's super important that you know the answers. For the oral test, it's pretty important. And then when you actually fly, you find out it's not nearly as complicated as they make it out to be. Did you have any trouble with holding pattern entries?
On the test, yes,
But in real life, no. Okay? So here's why. There's 3 pattern entries. Direct, parallel, and teardrop. Yeah, I even put them in that order. All right. So, and here I think is why people get so screwed up. They see a drawing like this, and it talks about direct, parallel, teardrop, and there's 1,000 lines and a bunch of degrees. They talk about 70 degrees a bunch. All right? What you really have to understand is the entry is all designed to make the turns as easy as possible to get into the hold properly. All right? So I'm going to start with my little pattern up here. And I think I got a red pen. Oh, I don't want red. My green one works. All right. If you always, you've got the line that is the line you're going to hold on, right? So imagine that that line continues out straight the opposite beat. So opposite the hold. And then you got the side you're holding on and the side you're not holding on. Draw through your fix and a slash up going into the side you're holding on. All right? So if you're making right turns, it goes this way. The whole idea is to have as few turns as possible. Everything on this side of this line is a direct entry. And what that means is you fly straight to the fix on whatever route you were given to get there. And then when you get there, you just make this 180 degree turn and you go outbound and then you come because you're going the right direction. And even if you come from here, that's...
You don't have to enter on an inbound or outbound leg when you're in direct.
You may not be on this line. The ATC may tell you to go directly to. So I'm going to do this real quick.
So instead of holding east of wraps.
So they could have told you cleared to wraps intersection via direct. Hold east on Victor 244 left turns, maintain 8,000 feet. Okay, so instead of flying up here like this and then following the line in, they just told you to turn straight and fly here. Okay, now they still want you to hold that exact same east of wraps or left turns, right? Mm-hmm. So you'd fly up here, you get to wraps, you make a left turn, and you just start making your circles here, but you're still going to hold on this line.
Gotcha. So just when you came in, you wouldn't make a whole 180 degree turn. You'd just make...
You'd go over 180 degrees.
Your entry is still over that point.
You get to that point and you turn until you're running parallel to Victor 244.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you just make that left turn. Okay? So now this is called a direct entry because see, I don't know if I'm blocking, but so if I'm flying up from here, I get to here, and then I just make the turn and get on the line and follow it around. All right? You can theoretically do it from over here, like this. Okay? Direct entry, just think of it, if I was right here, I would just go directly into my holding pattern. So everything on this side of the line. If I'm down here in this little pie shape, and they say that this is 70 degrees, that may come up on the written test. But this little 70-degree window down here, you're going to do a teardrop entry. You're going to fly up, and then you're going to go at about 30 degrees off of this course, and you're going to make a right-hand turn, get on this line, and then fly back in. And then you go around. So that's the teardrop.
So you don't go all the way to the edge of the outbound leg, you only go 30 degrees out.
Well, you're flying at 30 degrees.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
So, but you'll fly this way for 1 minute,
Okay.
and then you'll do a 180-degree turn, and you'll have to rush that 180-degree turn in order to center up. But then you center up, and then you fly in. Okay?
Alright.
And then,
after you cross over the wheel, or wherever the spot is supposed to go.
yeah. So, alright. The parallel entry, so this bigger chunk here, just, I don't know, 110 degrees. This little wedge here. You do what's called a parallel entry. And the word is much more complicated than the process. If you're gonna, so we fly, so say they had us flying in this way, we get to Geiger, we just fly out for 1 minute, and you make a 270-degree left turn. You turn in the direction of the protected side, so it's the wrong direction. This
But
is
you're
supposed to be
still
right.
in the protected zone.
You're still in the protected zone,
Gotcha.
270 degrees, which gives you a 30-degree intercept on this, and then you go wings level, and you cross this, and you're in the pattern.
So 1 minute long turn after you cross the point. And then
So
turn left.
just here, fly out for 1 minute, 270 degrees. So 270 degrees, if you do the math, 270 divided by 3 is 90 seconds, so a minute and a half turn. And that brings you back. All right. For the written test, these are things you need to know. In the real world, any entry that keeps you in the protected space is legal and acceptable. On your practical test, you have to do the appropriate entry for the holds that you're getting. Anything about that sounds confusing to you?
No, that was all pretty good. And if you do have ForeFlight, it will make holds for you. Like if you can, I guess, access that feature.
Mm-hmm.
How do you access that feature?
Yeah.
You select the airport, and then in the option bar, you just select hold.
Yeah.
And then we'll put on the, I guess, recommended entry.
What's the option bar?
So select the airport.
Yeah.
If
You
it's
should
not
see
a-
something that says add to route.
Yep. Add it.
Instead of selecting
Oh,
add
on
to route, go all the way
departure? Oh,
over,
yeah.
and it will say hold.
Then you go to procedure, hit departure, approach.
Inbound leg, there's
Let's
left or right turns, altitude, speed. That's cool.
Okay.
What if it's not an airport? Can you do that?
Yeah, you can make
So
your
we did
own
inbound
spot.
approach,
You'll just have to have
distance,
more.
We'll do time, altitude, altitude.
And then you can create a hold anywhere.
Cruising.
Yep.
Speed time.
Okay.
This will probably come up in our
That's cool.
advanced class on how to use ForeFlight.
Enter on the inbound.
When you do it.
Yeah.
If you don't.
I gotta put one together.
But that's only going to route you to the VOR. So if they give you something that's not right to the VOR, you're going to have to make your own thing. So let's-
Yeah, but you could. Okay, so. Oh, you probably don't have it in there. Oh, yeah, there you go. IFR low. Alright,
Whoa.
so we'll go over these charts later. But so, say they want you to hold class. There's class, hit more. Okay. Add it to the route.
I got a lot going on in the route.
There's no hole.
Oh, look at those holes. Oh yeah, more. So look at that. Old chunk.
So you have to have it in your route.
And then that pops it up right there.
So the good news is almost always the hold is going to be in your route because they're going to want to make it simple for you to get to. All right.
That is
Now, direct entry. So there's a 180-degree space from here to here. If you're coming on the same side as the inbound leg, you fly in and you just start making that turn. All right, parallel entry. How do we do parallel entry?
You fly the inbound leg outbound and then come back in at a 270-degree angle in the safe zone back to the entry point.
Yep. So, and this is if you're on the same side of the course that you're going to hold. This is when you end up with a parallel. And if you look, it's all about, it's an easier turn. If I tried to teardrop this, I'd have to come in and I'd have to make a really big turn and come this way.
Mm-hmm.
All right? If I tried to direct this, I'd have to come in and I'd have to I'd have to do acrobatics to make that turn. What's that?
Call it parallel.
Because you're flying
Parallel.
the wrong direction
Okay.
on your inbound leg. So you're flying parallel, but you're literally flying right on top of the same one the wrong way.
So it's going to be reversed. If you have it right where you're going, it's going to read you going backwards on it.
Yeah.
On your view or where you going from.
Yeah.
If you have your heading bug set, your heading bug will be at your ass.
Yeah, and then you get around and line up.
There you go, and then you'll turn. But so a minute out, 2 seconds. Okay, I'm going to guarantee you, with every penny of pay that I make here, that you're going to get some kind of holding question on your written test.
Because
Fair enough.
You have to do them.
More than just one.
More than one.
Okay.
So this is why most of a day dedicated to talking about this once. You're going to do a bunch of these in practice. You have to do them. You're required to do one every 6 months to keep current, to do a practice hold either in the sim or up in the sky. I have never had a holding pattern issued to me in flight. The modern era has made it far less likely. And if you do get one, it's probably going to be a published hold. So you'll be able to look right on your system and go from there.
Because they're probably more likely to just tell you to slow down or speed up. If they can't.
Slow down, speed up. They'll vector you at a different angle to make it take you longer to get there. They figure it out much earlier now. So they could tell you that there's going to be expect delays, and then at least you can plan for it. But also, we don't fly into places that are that busy most of the time. You're not landing at SeaTac.
Yeah.
You're landing at Bremerton or Renton. Okay. Teardrop entry. How do we do a teardrop entry?
Come in. So we're over here. Come in and fly normal.
That is it. Okay. So,
And you fly for 1 minute past the point, and then you turn around until you're going to have to go steeper or more than the standard rate.
yeah, you're going to have to come around because it's more aggressive to get back in because you'll fly a minute out and then you got to make more than 180 degree turn. Like it's a 270 degree turn.
So it's the same as us.
Yep, it's just flipped over. Okay, so now what screws people up. So if we're holding a guide, I'm going to draw a different Geiger here real quick. And we're on the 090, but you've got left turns.
I can see that being confusing.
Okay.
As long as you draw that line.
Well, the line's still in the symbol.
All right.
This just goes.
Hey, Josh.
Right?
Yeah.
Come here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Show me how to figure out.
Wait, so teardrops on the font. Oh, if it be on that. Okay, so let's just extend the line and put this line through. Okay, so for this.
Okay. Pause.
Yeah.
You just made the mistake.
Okay.
So what did he do?
He put the line.
Didn't go in the safe zone. The line
In the safe zone.
supposed to go through
So
the
line
safe
opposite goes from top
zone.
left to bottom right.
Put the
Oh,
Yeah.
that.
There you
The
go.
point is to
If you can learn that,
Okay.
figuring this out becomes immensely easier.
Yeah, that does make sense.
You have to draw the line through the fix and into the safe zone. And if you do that every time, so how many degrees is that angle right there?
This one?
Yep.
This is 30, right?
No.
70?
70. Okay.
And this
So-
10.
Do me a favor right now.
Yeah.
70 right there. Write the number.
Gotcha. And 110?
110.
That's right there.
And then what's on the other side here?
This guy?
This whole thing there? What is that?
190?
180.
180.
Half a circle is 180. Alright? Alright. So where's my direct entry zone?
It's anything over here?
In the 180 arc.
Yeah, in the 180 arc. Direct
Okay.
entry.
Where's my teardrop zone?
Well, teardrop and this one is not. So this is teardrop,
Yep.
and then this is parallel.
There we go. Hammer this. Hammer. Okay. In the book, he talks about the handy dandy plastic template thing. Don't ever make one. Don't ever use that. Don't do that. You don't need it. They make gizmos that you can get that are like, these are my pattern entry systems. You don't need it. If you can draw that line just like that. So add the extension and draw the slash and just go through the fix into the protected area. And then remember 70, 110, 180, you will be fine on test questions. Concur? All right, and then on the check ride, you do have to do these entries. Now we're going to teach you how to do these entries. You're going to do them dozens and dozens of times in the sim. I'm mostly going to do them in the sim because it wastes a lot of gas to go up there and do a bunch of holds in the plane.
Yeah.
So we're going to do them in the sim. And you've already done racetracks. All right, everybody here. Most of you have actually done them fairly well stacked. Tristan, you got a little work to do, and you haven't done them at all. All right, but that's why we do. It's an amazing practice to get ready to go do this, because all we're going to do now is add in this little detail here, and then you're just going to keep hitting that same spot over and over and over again. The next exercise you'll do, we're going to put a VOR in. You're going to tune and identify the VOR, and you're going to fly to it on specific radials, and then you'll fly outbound for a certain amount of time, and then I'll make you turn 90 degrees, and then you'll turn 90 degrees, and you'll catch a different radial, and you'll come back in. And you're going to keep practicing intercepting radials, which you do as private pilots, right? All right? So, and then we'll start going, okay, you hit the radial, you're going to immediately make a 180 degrees to the right, and then you're going to do a racetrack for me. And then we'll start throwing wind on it. And
Yeah, then everything goes on through.
no, then it's easy. All right? So, but there's a lot of ink spilled about holding patterns. They are not that hard. But next week, you should be able to walk in here, and I should say, okay, I'm going to give you, just a chunk of a chart, and say, okay, you're going to hold on this, you're going to hold here, you're going to hold here, you're going to hold here. You should be able to draw it in, and then you should be able to tell me where's my direct entry zone, where's my parallel entry zone, where's my teardrop entry zone. So if you want to write something down right now, it's be able to draw holding patterns based on a holding clearance, and then be able to identify the entry zones. All right. Then you're going to practice. You're going to use the TD2 and the FMX first. All right, we'll use the TD2 first. Then when we move you up to the FMX, you'll use it. When you are ready, you can shoot practice approaches with a safety pilot. Now, when you are ready is when we tell you you are ready to do stuff with a safety pilot. One of the tricks is there's a lot of radio calls that go into, it's actually harder to shoot a practice approach. The radio calls for shooting a practice approach take more work than the actual calls to shoot an actual approach. Because on an actual approach, you're already in the IFR system, and they're expecting you to need an approach. And you probably requested it early on in the flight. You know, even if it's not IFR, if it's not IMC, and you're flying on an IFR flight plan, you can always ask for an approach. And very often you say, hey, I'd like to shoot the full approach. Even though you can't log it as an approach, if the weather is, unless you have to fly down to the final approach phase. But practicing shooting the approach is worth it anyway. All right?
So, if you're flying IFR, you fly an approach, you can't, if
the weather is not IMC, you cannot log it as an approach.
Unless you're under the hood with a safety
Under the hood with a safety pilot.
So the safety pilot means who?
Somebody who's able to fly the aircraft and has a license.
They have to have
So
a
it
private.
doesn't-
It can't be a sport pilot.
They gotta be private.
It's got to be private or better.
Okay, gotcha. So it's not you.
But it doesn't
It doesn't have
have
to
to
be
be.
the instructor. It could just mean that.
and you can
Eventually, what will happen is we'll get you guys going up with each other
One.
because you also need to build time towards commercial.
Right.
And guess what? The cheapest way to build time towards commercial is for two of you to get in a plane, one of you be the safety pilot, the other one to fly under the hood. You both get to log it as PIC time.
Yeah.
Um,
and we could shoot approaches and stuff.
And you-
One of us under the hood. If
yes.
it's not IMC.
And once you are instrument rated, you can actually file and fly IFR. It's still simulated IFR, but you can fly in the system. What you can't do with a safety pilot that's just a private pilot is fly in the system. You can't file and open the IFR flight plan. So if you're on a practice approach and you're not on an IFR flight plan, you have to go around. You have to dodge clouds. So you may have. This is why I said it's harder to do it this way than it is to do the actual, because the safety pilot may actually have to come on the radio and say, hey, we have to dodge some clouds. We're going to deviate left 30 degrees. And then as the person under the hood, you're going to go around the clouds and then get back on the track and fly down. If you're filed, you just fly the approach. In fact, you might take the hood off and just fly it.
So that seems to me like that would put a bit of extra workload on ATC.
It absolutely does.
If you go into an airport that's busy, can they deny you?
Absolutely.
So I imagine you would cover that.
Spokane approach, I'm an instrument student and I request blah, blah, blah. It's always a good thing, workload permitting. If you just say, hey, workload permitting, it acknowledges to them that you know they're busy. And then be smart about it. One thing is, if it's the middle of the day, don't try to do Geiger. All right? Instead, ask for a practice approach into Coeur d'Alene or Deer Park or someplace else.
So it's 6 p.m. Don't try to do Geiger.
Yeah, 6 p.m. is a bad time to do Geiger. Now, at 9 o'clock at night, a Geiger will work with you all day. Because
Midnight, they love you.
they're bored.
Anything else to do?
Exactly. All right. So, in the book, they talk about the heading overlay method. All right. Now, what I'm going to tell you is there may be value in this method for you. I don't like it. It confuses me. Okay? What they mean is that so you imagine that the hold is overlaid on your heading indicator, and then you figure out if you're in the direct entry zone. All right. So this says it's in the direct entry zone because you're flying on this heading and you're over the top of it, so you can make a right-hand turn and just directly enter the hold. This one, you'd have to do parallel entry because you make a left turn, 270, and then you enter the hold. Okay? And obviously, teardrop, this is the fix, so you'd fly past and you'd teardrop in.
Gotcha.
Okay? I put this on the slide because it's in the book, and I think when you read through, maybe now that part of the book may make more sense to you. Also, understand that this diagram, ABC, corresponds to ABC. I don't think that was exceptionally clear in the book.
So you have 3 planes all about to have a head-on collision.
Yeah.
So, or imagine B and C aren't there. So A, you are very clearly in the teardrop, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what you would see on a heading indicator. And I do think there's value in spending some time looking at those pictures and those heading indicators going, okay, so this is how, because you're going to have to do this in a plane. For the written test, this isn't going to do you any good. This isn't really that necessary to look at. All right, timed approaches. I have never done one, ever. There are multiple questions on the test about timed approaches. There must be an operating control tower for a timed approach. And what a timed approach is ATC. Usually it's in a non-radar environment. Let's see. Oh, I thought it was on there. So, yeah, I even put it in the title. It's usually in a non-radar environment. That means ATC can't see the planes. To a fairly busy, smaller airport, they will put you in a stack 1,000 feet apart on the same holding fix. So you are expected to maintain your altitude within plus or minus 100 feet the entire time you are on a hold. Commercial pilots are expected to maintain it within 50 feet, plus or minus 50 feet. They'll stack you up, and then what they'll do is they'll tell the bottom person in the stack that they are cleared for the approach at such and such a time.
Oh, that's wild.
Well, so you have to do math in your head and figure out, they give you a Zulu time, what time it is, and how much you need to trim out of your next turn in the pattern so that you leave the holding fix at exactly that time. So if they tell you a time that is 3 minutes in the future and you just cross the fix, so you go 1 minute, and then you're going to go 30 seconds, then a minute turn around, so you have 2:30, and then 30 seconds to hit the. All right, and you're supposed to hit it to the minute.
To the minute? Okay.
To the minute. Now here's the good news is I've never ever heard of anybody doing this on a check ride. And I have never done one in real life.
What's the scenario for that kind of thing?
A whole bunch of planes flying into an area that has no radar coverage, and they're all arriving at the same time on IFR flight plans.
So like, all right, no, just stack them.
So that was
Stack 'em up.
just really unlucky.
What's that? Well, yeah, and they don't. It's not how. There's almost no area anymore that this comes up to be an issue.
Because everyone is ready.
You Googling stuff up there, or are you taking notes? She is clearly not listening to it.
Sorry.
What percentage of your pay do we get if we do one?
Yeah.
Yeah, what percentage of your pay do I get if you don't do one?
Oh boy.
0.000.
There you see. Yeah, I will give you. I will give you a bet of 1-to-1 odds because I'm going to win, and I win with enough of you that it doesn't matter. All right, he may ask about it though in your morals, and it's definitely there are definitely questions that can come up on your written. I would give you a 50-50 chance of getting questions on this. Big one is there has to be an active control tower. You have to be in direct communications with ATC. One of the things that'll throw you off is doesn't mean that you have to be in communication with the tower. You have to be in communication with somebody from ATC. So you may be on with center or approach control. All right. Do you guys know what the difference between approach control and departure control is?
The frequency?
one's directing you in and one's directing you out?
They're the same people. It's always
different frequency.
same frequency.
Same frequency.
Yeah. It's just when you're talking to them. So if you're flying into Spokane, you call them Spokane approach. When you're flying out of Spokane, you call them Spokane departure.
Because that way they automatically know what you.
They know which direction you're going. It keeps it clear, all right? And they know what your intentions are. You don't generally fly into a place going, Spokane departure, this is so-and-so, I'm landing at Spokane. All right? But it is the same person. All right? And we're actually going to hit that here in a second. All right. If there are multiple missed approaches, none of them can have a course reversal. So what does that mean? If any part of a track to go somewhere goes back on itself, that's called a course reversal. All right? So think of the parallel entry where you fly down, you turn around, you come back on the same thing. That's a course reversal. That's not a charted course reversal. If the missed approach, you cannot have a missed approach. If there's multiple missed approaches, none of them can have a course reversal. If there's only one missed approach, it can't have a course reversal, and the ceiling and visibility must meet circling minimums.
Gotcha.
You don't know what that means exactly yet, but most approaches are designed to go straight in. But if the wind is the wrong way, at a lot of airports, they only have an approach into one end of the runway. You'll have what's called a circling approach. So, do we even have a circling approach?
We do, and it's ridiculously high.
Yeah, because there's a big ass fucking hill to hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if you fly, so if you're coming from the north, it's easier to fly the 1-6 approach into Deer Park. But if the winds are telling you to use, what is it, 3-2?
So 1-6,
3-4?
Oh shoot.
3-4?
Do math in public. That's wrong.
The opposite runway, you can fly the 1-6 and request a circle to land approach. And basically, you fly a really tight pattern because you have to be able to see the airport the entire time.
What else?
It changes.
It changes. It depends. It's on the chart.
Okay.
But the bottom line is, so Nicole mentioned our circling minimum is like 4,000 feet.
Yep.
4,400 or something, isn't it?
I think it's either 43 or 44.
So, okay?
Yeah.
They couldn't use timed approaches here unless the ceiling and visibility were at least 4,400 feet.
Gotcha.
Not down at, because the regular approach
Down to.
comes down to like
Traffic pattern.
32. All right. And then when cleared for the approach, you cannot do a procedure turn. We haven't really talked about procedure turns yet. We're going to talk about approaches later. What I'm going to tell you is this is one slide. There's a little sidebar in the book. Read it, know it, and then get on Prepware and search for all the questions about timed approaches and know the answers to those questions. Because in the actual flying of the airplane, it is highly unlikely you're going to have to do it. All right? And that concludes holds. We're going to move into Chapter 7, how the IFR system works.
How on Prepware, where do you go to search for questions?
Okay, I will do that right now.
If it's on your phone.
Well, if it's on your phone, you can't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on your computer, you can have that one.
You all have it.
Yeah,
It came with your software. Came with
How
your.
do we get access to that again?
You do what it says in the book.
Do what it says in the book. It's in the book.
Or you're like me and you
Download
Yeah.
I bought it on my iPad.
Yeah, literally.
I didn't have an iPad, but I prefer this one.
No, I figured it was in the book.
I didn't buy that instrument actually.
I see you guys paid a lot of attention to the first lesson in class.
I wasn't at the first lesson.
I was still trying to figure out why we were in class and we had a private test, so then I realized.
Alright. So in Prepware,
Which we all own.
which you all own, instrument rating airplane. If you go to study, okay. You come up here and you go to Tools, Quiz Maker, advanced search, and then now I recommend you do it like this. You go, what do we say, timed. Let's see if it gives me any questions. Search.
Can you confirm we can do that on a Mac?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same software.
It runs definitely on Apple than it does everything.
I hope it works on Mac because that's what I'm using.
That's what I'm using too.
Okay, so here, oh look, there's one question to really learn the answer. It looks like. So, but you see how I'm searching here. Sometimes you got to do a couple of searches to kind of. So it gives me 200 questions with the word approach in the explanation. Oh, no questions. That's funny. There used to, I actually had a question come up. All right. So that's a way to kind of start sorting through and seeing what.
What is the question? Just out of curiosity.
Well, now that I changed it somehow. When more than one circuit of a holding pattern is needed to lose altitude or become better established on a course, the additional circuits can be made, and the question is, at the pilot's discretion, only in emergency, only if the pilot advises ATC and ATC approves. And then it says, if timed approaches are in use, aircraft are expected to proceed inbound on final approach when clearance is received. Pilots are responsible for advising ATC if they elect to make additional circuits to lose altitude or become established on a course. There's no AIM language regarding ATC approval, but it is implied. And this is a weird problem with working on this screen. There we go. Answer A is incorrect because although additional circuits may be made at your discretion, you must advise ATC. Answer B is incorrect because it is not necessary to declare an emergency. So the answer is C, only if the pilot advises ATC and ATC approves. Okay?
So it's not at your discretion.
No.
Your discretion, just you have to get.
Yeah, so it
Permission
is
from
at your
ATC.
discretion.
But they have to approve.
Okay. So we're 1843. Do you guys want to take a break or do you just want to keep rolling?
I gotta get some more water. Do you guys have water?
Yep.
Well, if you open the fridge right here, there's
All right, so let's make it a quick, short break.
Thank you.
And Bill, I was going to tell you. So when I did my IFR check ride, then they didn't approve us for an approach because we asked for it and they said unable. And the DPE said, okay, cancel flight following. And then he made us do the approach anyway. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with the DPE. But looking back on that.
So you were on flight following?
Yeah, we were talking with everyone, getting flight following, and then doing a bunch of practice approaches.
Mhm.
And they denied us for the localizer in Sandpoint. And so he said, you guys cancel flight following. You can stop talking to them. And then he said, do it anyway.
Was it the same guy these guys were using?
No.
Oh.
It was a different guy.
So,
And he actually doesn't have his DPE license anymore.
oh.
It got taken away.
Sherry told me an interesting story about that they will put you on a review and you have to do, the DPEs can get DPE or whatever you want to call it. Somebody comes out from the ATC and watches them on check rides.
So the FAA will come observe.
Yeah, observe. Yeah.
They'll do it even when they're not on review. I think they have to do one a year.
They will they'll randomly show up.
Mhm.
Man, for the
It's
private
an
pilot getting
Apple
that, that was
Just withdraw straight. Just draw what you want.
You can
deny
as
it.
the pilot taking
You
the
get
check,
it,
you can deny
$500.
having an observed check ride.
okay.
You can, yes. You can tell them that you're not comfortable with that.
Very useful.
So I've
And
done
as a
it.
private pilot, I would probably
I had to know.
I'd probably ask not to have somebody observing as a private.
Yeah.
Instrument, commercial, everything later on.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't think-
They're not watching you anyway. They're watching him.
Yeah. I just think
It's too
that's
much.
additional pressure.
Hold on. It definitely does.
Especially on the first one, yeah. Because I mean, now you know that's,
Okay.
Yeah.
So
you know, it's a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal.
so just for a regular Spokane,
Yeah, every time I remember that, it's just super, super interesting.
probably good. Hopefully,
So-
I don't see why not.
Talking about holds,
I want to do it on
when I first started flying here,
It's just a spot.
Honest was
Yeah.
my instructor.
Okay, so what he said is
He
you
was
have the IFR.
maybe he was training you before
So let's try.
getting
IFR.
more IFR stuff. I'm not sure.
Maybe.
So
He
wait,
had just
are you
taken off. You know, we can't get on the radio, so he had followed the flight plan, went out in the airplane, took off,
Oh, it did bring us there.
and
Nice.
he had
Okay,
to
so
make it out to,
parts.
I believe it was Hitru before anybody else was coming in. Is that the way it is?
That's still how it is, yeah.
Okay.
I had to go out
Yeah.
first.
That
Like
citation was
that.
trying to make
Okay.
it.
They're doing
Okay,
holes.
so
Yeah, they
I have a little
held
hold
for
button
almost 20 minutes out.
in this little option. So if you click on cars,
I remember that, yeah.
It does.
I wasn't in the airplane, unfortunately, but we were laughing about that pretty hard.
Well,
I did.
Sean told me, he said, you tell Johannes. And I told Johannes, and he just giggled. He thought that was the funniest
Okay.
thing he'd ever done.
So
So there was
I have
another
all that, except
time
I also have hold.
Where they asked for the
That makes
approach
you
in,
think if you
and they beat the citation by like 5 minutes asking for
The
the
last.
approach in.
Oh.
And so the
I'll be
citation
mad.
waited for
But I think
a
I
good
probably
long
was supposed to
while.
if I was on my phone.
But
I'm
yeah, they
guessing
were
it's
already
a
on the
phone
course
call.
inbound.
But maybe
But-
there's another.
And once they do it takes a long time.
Why am I in
Yeah.
South Korea? Okay.
So on
That's
this
why.
approach, I know this is probably stuff further
so
on
if we
the
go
class,
down
you have
to
to fly 80 knots or something to your selected airspeed, or does it not matter? You try to just
Where's a little? I guess
get into the final fix.
What was the question?
Do you what?
Do you
when
have to have a
Oh,
specific
maybe it is
airspeed
the
to fly?
upgraded version. Like,
You don't have to, but you're gonna.
You
You want to fly faster than that.
that might be it. But can you do it? Holds on.
Let's
an
see,
iPad?
on the approach, it's Webda, Jatley, Ogsdu,
No, I got the
Archie.
basic. That's what I
How do you say
started
that
with.
last one?
Artie's
That's what I
last
did. I
one,
actually dropped down.
Well,
Yeah,
runway.
that's
Did you
the
work for a
missed
while?
approach.
Yeah, I paid for it.
Yeah. Runway 2
It might not even.
Last
might
one,
just be
is that
second.
Archie?
Yeah, Archie.
is runway 2.
So weird.
Well, I guess it's 0.5 from runway 2.
Okay.
Pretty much.
What does the third one
yeah.
give you besides all the stuff? Because if it just gives you like international stuff, then big deal.
At 3,260.
a 3D view.
So when you're,
This is the second one.
Circling
because
is
I take that, that's almost straight in.
This is
448.
the second class.
Yeah.
So
What are we saying?
basic and
I take it that's almost straight in from Webda. If you're 80, on the 86 level. 80?
Can you do the next one?
Yeah, for the whole.
Yeah, it's pretty much straight in.
I can do
Actually,
that.
yeah, it is.
So you just set
Yeah,
your
yeah.
stage
Which one do you have? Wait a
level
second.
speed.
Go first. Maybe you just need second.
To
I think I say more.
Second of the plan.
Which one do you
Yeah, you wouldn't be going
Well, I
slow.
think I would
It's
just
like
have the-
100 and
You at least
something,
set
so down.
basically
And
You
then
don't
you
need
got
to-
like really
okay.
close, you might start slowing.
Okay.
So this is a step
The
down.
second one will do it.
So
At
you
the
step
final
down.
approach fix, you usually want to have your approach flap set,
No.
and then you just start
Stop
slowing
it.
down.
Okay.
And then once you see the runway, then it's visual.
What I want to know is how do I. Hey, Nicole.
No. I'm just kidding, but
So you have to have the second level for flight to
Two holding patterns?
add holds. and
Because
stuff.
I can do it, but he can't. And we're thinking it's because it's the different.
But he's
levels.
got third level.
What would be the difference?
so there's whole.
Yeah, but
But I can't do that.
is it because you need at least number
Did you
two?
do the first one?
Yeah.
You should get the third one if you're doing
Did you
IFR stuff.
see the video of that aircraft that
The
was
third one.
had the ground
No,
speed
second one.
800
I only had the second
800 knots?
And you
It happened in the last week. They were flying, got a 246 mile an hour tailwind. And it was inside the
Yeah, I
cabin.
didn't have the second one.
Okay, so
You
you
should
should
have
just
just
need
beat up. Yeah, just
That's probably what I have actually. I don't think I have by the third one if you don't need it for anything else.
Yeah.
I
The
probably
third one doesn't have much extra for us, right? It's
Yeah.
just that.
I don't think I have them. It was too expensive.
It's like
Alright.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not an airline pilot. So for sure.
The price of it being right there.
Yeah, airlines is yeah, Sydney TV.
At that point, they're like, we don't care how much you charge. They're looking for much money.
Exactly right. Do you think airlines even use ForeFlight?
So
Everybody
you
does.
wonder,
So,
something similar to that.
isn't there something called Garmin? Garmin has their own app. Yeah.
Garmin with ForeFlight has cornered the market on this, though.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that freight dogs use ForeFlight.
Big dogs. Okay.
On my last flight from Dallas to Spokane, I was sitting by a pilot that was in the jump. He was just helping ride back up to Spokane. And he was going through all of his information for his next flight. It was the next day. And that looked extremely involving. I think he got an email with 32 pages or something
Oh my gosh.
of weather briefing and passengers and weight and balance type stuff. And it was intense looking. But that one there, he was using something other than ForeFlight. I didn't delve into it.
Oh, they've got proprietary software.
It was Scott.
EFBs. Yep. All right. There you go.
Those guys are good.
I think there should be one free, something you're required to have, like ForeFlight. It should be the one, general, what everybody uses.
You know why everybody uses ForeFlight?
I don't know.
Because ForeFlight built the best app on the planet
Yeah.
first,
No, literally.
and they update it regularly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so what's the pro subscription?
$360.
Yeah.
360? Yeah, what's that? 2 hours of flight time?
True.
That's a year.
That's a year.
2
So,
hours a year.
I mean, I have the top end, plus I have Canadian plates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got some extra stuff that I've tacked onto mine. But I spend, it's $1,000 a year for my updates on my GPSs in the plane. So when you start looking at it, cost-wise,
Yeah.
ForeFlight, for the buck,
Basically $1 a day.
yeah, well, it makes things so much easier and so much safer that it's worth it.
Well, I just don't know why they don't make something like that mandatory. You know what I mean? Like, for the options it gives you, if you have emergencies or problems, it's like, because you don't have to have ForeFlight to make half this stuff. It's just like,
No,
But,
so,
yeah.
but, yeah, getting a pro level is also good for just keeping your logbook.
With your maps on your GPSs, do they have the plates and everything?
I have Jeppesen plates in the plane.
Okay.
So, okay. So, early airway beacons. Yeah, the bottom line is IFR flight developed from originally they would follow roads and they would follow railroads, and sometimes they ran into mountains because railroads would go. And then they went to
Then they started flying through the tunnels.
no.
No, you can't do that because the trains do too. They use, trains anyway, they use up the oxygen in the tunnels. That's what happens when you're train hopping too.
So,
The coal trains, they burn up their oxygen.
but then they started building towers, and they would use bonfires. They would use lights. The first radio beacons, there were four-way beacons, and then there were non-directional beacons. So I don't want to spend hours on this because guess what? There's no questions about the history of it. All right, but it is cool, and I would suggest when you have time going through and looking at the history. But yeah, 4-course radio ranges were literally just north, south, east, west. Then you try to get on one of them and home to the radio. What is interesting is even when I started flying, GPS wasn't in most planes. Like a GPS mounted in a trainer plane was almost unheard of. I had a portable Magellan, backcountry GPS that I would carry in the plane with me, but it didn't have any aviation-related spots.
It just told you where
Told you where I was, and I could figure out how to get back to where I had dropped the pin. You know what I mean?
Nice.
And it certainly wasn't overlaying it on an aviation map.
And then
All right.
go into your autopilot.
Yeah.
We didn't have autopilots.
We didn't have a lot of pilots.
We didn't have autopilot. Autopilot was a stick.
Autopilots in a 172 weren't a thing when I started, and I didn't start flying until 2005.
Wow. That's
So-
crazy.
It's crazy.
That's the year I was born.
So,
Yeah.
but in your lifetime, we have gone from that to a guy in the back of the room that says, "Why don't they make you get for flight?"
I know, but now it's okay.
So, okay.
Yeah, I guess that's
So, we would fly to NDBs. Literally, the arrow just points at the NDB and you home to it. All right. So, flight data progress strips, they still use these. They talk about shrimp boats in the book. In case the system goes down, they have a paper backup that is being kept all the time. So, they used to have them on like a map on a table and you slide them around.
Is anybody toured the tower at Kalispell?
Yeah.
I have.
They have. I went there. We watched them print those off. And
That's
stick
cool.
them off.
So they print them off for every plane that comes into their sector and they keep track of where they are. It's all a backup. All right. So ARTC. When you're flying, there's all these invisible boundaries out there. All right. And around here, so we're in Seattle Center. You see North Idaho is in Seattle Center. When you leave Seattle Center, you're going to be in Salt Lake Center. All right. And when you get someplace along the line, whoever you're with is going to tell you to go away. And they're going to give you a frequency and you'll talk to the other one.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Now, you do learn that over time, you can start to predict what frequencies they're going to give you and roughly what that handoff's going to be, depending on how often you make the flight. All right. But so if you fly from here down to Las Vegas, for example, you go from Seattle Center, you might go into Salt Lake Center. You might clip Oakland Center, you may and then you'll end up down in Los Angeles Center. All right, so the centers all handle things up at higher altitudes, generally above 6,000 feet. All right.
Like Anchorage Center. Yep.
Imagine
And Honolulu Center.
Salt Lake City's the biggest one. It's huge.
It is.
Actually, Alaska's the biggest.
Alaska's biggest.
Right.
Yeah, but not to scale. All right.
Alaska's like
All right. So if you look on an IFR en route chart, which is what I pulled up on your thing, so there's IFR low en route, that's below 18,000 feet, and IFI high charts above 18,000 feet. You see the little zipper looking thing there at A?
Yeah.
That's the boundary between Albuquerque and Fort Worth Center. And then if you see a little postage stamp, it's got the same little zippery shape around it. That tells you the frequency for Albuquerque Center in that area. That Tucumcari, that's a specific subsector, irrelevant to you. You would just, if you had an issue, if something was going on and you were trying to get a hold of center, this is a way to find the center frequency. You would just call Albuquerque Center on 126.85. Anybody know what the 319.2 is?
military.
Military UHF frequencies. All right. What was it? So why did I do that? So this is there should have been a map. Oh, there we go. I don't know why I did it in that order. All right. So Spokane. All right. That little box that says Spokane approach within 20 nautical miles. You call approach because you're going towards Spokane. All right. If you want to get flight following out in that area, you call Spokane approach. Say, hey, I'm here. I would like flight following. That is a valid frequency to do that with. Interestingly, Spokane approach isn't on the low altitude chart. They give you Seattle Center out there, and you can get on Seattle Center. If you're talking to Seattle Center wants you to go to Spokane approach, they'll give you the frequency for Spokane approach.
So if you're in IFR instead of VFR, you're contacting Seattle instead of Spokane.
Well, they will eventually, Seattle will pass you to Spokane if you're landing in Spokane. But if you're going to stay above about 6,000 feet, they'll just hold on to you.
Why would you stay with
Usually,
Seattle
I
if you're
had
going to land in
They
Spokane?
still pass you over.
What altitudes?
6,400.
I know, I've been pretty high over there going to like Pasco, Canada.
I'll tell you, if you're in the flight levels, they don't pass you off. And let's see, do I have it? Good Lord, no. I thought I had it on here. Had a diagram. Oh, so here we go. So center controls everything above roughly 6,000 feet. Now you see the Tracons and the Rapcons reach up into that in some places. So you may be like 8,000, 10,000 feet. They will all, like a Charlie will always own the airspace up to at least the top of the Charlie. It's not something we track like as pilots. They tell us who they want us to talk to. But, if you're at 14,000 feet scooting across Spokane, they probably aren't going to switch you to approach. They'll just have you go over the top and stay in Seattle Center. Because Center owns everything above there.
So whenever you file an IFR plan somewhere, you're going to be in the center frequency.
Not necessarily.
No, okay.
All right, and we'll come back to that.
Okay.
All right, real quick.
So if you're in 172 at 60,000 feet.
There you go. All right, so I don't remember why I put this slide on here, other than all the frequencies that are on this chart are frequencies you need for navigation, and at the airports, what they give you is the weather. So the frequencies get the ATIS at the local area. All right. So if you're within 40 nautical miles of a radar station, they only have to have 3 miles of separation. If you're more than 40 nautical miles from a radar station, the actual radar antenna, they have to use 5 miles of separation. All right. But what ATC does is they provide separation for IFR traffic. They only provide it for VFR traffic on a workload permitting basis, and that's when you get flight following. And mostly they're just giving you advisories.
Oh.
All right. Class D airspace, and people realize this, tower controllers do not give you traffic separation protection. Most of them don't have radar. They're just looking out the window at you. You call, you tell them where you are. That's why they say things like, let me know when you're on a 1 mile final. Because they're trying to figure out where to look to see you coming in. But everybody in that space is required to have two-way communication. Unless they've gotten an exception. And then they're standing up there with binoculars watching those guys. All right?
So, Nicole, when we were doing VFR flight following to Spokane, if they wanted, they could have said we're too busy. No. Okay. Because we were VFR.
Yeah, but at night they're
Yeah.
not normally busy enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, and actually, Spokane approach is extremely supportive. Mm-hmm. So, and
Yeah, we were Seattle Center.
oh, you want to? Because you left from here. Yeah.
Oh,
Were you
yeah.
flying to Spokane?
We were, and they eventually handed us off.
Yeah, and
but
you have the
that's what we
Spokane
call it.
approach. Yeah. So, they, like I said, we don't know the magic lines where they decide to hand people off. So that 6,000 foot is like a general thing. Again, if you're going to fly just over the top of a Class Charlie, good Lord. Binging at me here. If you're on a long cross country, they don't go. You will generally not speak to another approach until you are getting to where you are going to descend and land.
Sorry, when you said that, I originally thought for VFR flight following.
Oh,
So
yeah.
sorry. Yeah, I believe you're correct if you're just on an IFR flight.
Well, and like I said, if you're like at 8,000 feet, you may go into a terminal area, a Tracon controller space, and so they may hand you off. If you're up at like 9,000, 10,000 feet, you may be high enough that they don't hand you off. I think you're pretty much guaranteed to stay off at 11,000 feet because Class Charlie almost never goes past 10,000 feet. Almost never. There are exceptions.
I noticed on your diagram there too, it showed it said 6,000 feet MSI.
Yes, 6,000 feet up mean sea level,
Right.
not AGL.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I mean, we're very often around here flying around 7,500 feet MSL just so we don't run into a hill.
Yeah.
You know. Okay, required reports to ATC. If you're on an IFR flight plan, this is one you'll learn. Marvelous VFR, C500. So missed approach, airspeed plus or minus 10 knots or 5%. Reaching a holding fix or point which cleared, report this to ATC. When you're operating on a VFR on top clearance. You know the difference between VFR on top and VFR over the top? Have you ever heard these terms? So VFR over the top is when you're flying VFR and you fly and there's a bunch of clouds, there's a cloud layer in front of you and you go up and you stay above the clouds and you fly over the top but you can't see the ground. Can student pilots do that?
No.
That's good. I'm glad you're paying attention.
Private pilots can.
Private pilots can. Okay? But when you get to the other end, if you don't have an instrument rating, you need to have a hole to go back down through where you can see the ground. Okay, that's VFR over the top. VFR on top is an IFR pilot on an IFR flight plan gets into VFR weather, and they'll request VFR on top so that they can get a block of altitude so they can adjust to find the nice smooth ride and a good wind.
Gotcha.
But they're flying on both an IFR and VFR clearance.
That's one of them.
All right. But so wind and altitude change will be made when operating VFR on top. You have to report that. If your ETA changes more than 2 minutes, 3 minutes in the North Atlantic, only if you're not in radar contact, leaving any assigned holding, fix, or point, outer marker, fix, inbound on final when not in radar contact, unforecast weather and hazardous conditions, safety of flight information, emergencies and such, vacating an altitude or flight level, final approach fix inbound only when not in radar contact, radio or navigation approach equipment failure. So if any of your radio equipment fails, you have to report it, even if you have like a spare radio, backup radio, you still have to tell them I've lost one of my radios. Compulsory reporting points when not in radar contact. If a point on the map is marked as a solid, like a solid triangle for a waypoint or a filled-in VOR, if you're out of radar contact, you have to report when you reach that point. And then when unable to climb or descend at 500 feet per minute. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to descend at 500 feet per minute, but at some point your 172 stops being able to climb at 500 feet per minute. You're required to let ATC know that. All right. So,
I wonder what that height is for us.
What's that?
I wonder what that height is for us in the hour 122.
Depends
What
on
altitude is it where we can't climb more than 500 feet? That'd be like what?
About 4,000 feet.
Depends on
Go figure it out.
Yeah.
It's in the performance charts in the back of the book. So what's your ceiling? 13,000?
It's about a little under 13.
A little under 13.
Yeah.
So my guess would be somewhere around 11,000 feet. You'd start struggling to hit 500 foot per minute.
I don't know, around 11,000 in 6, 9, or 8 at least, like you're struggling to even continue going.
Isn't that what I said?
No,
Oh,
it's
you
even
can-
continuing to climb.
You can
Keep
continue.
climbing. Okay.
So like
So I think
10,000.
technically it's supposed to be 13, but
Yeah, well, on the service ceiling, 13,000 feet, you're supposed to be able to get a 50 foot per minute climb.
Okay.
And then when you hit your absolute ceiling, it won't climb at all. All right, so ADSB. I threw this slide in here mostly because you need to understand that, number one, to fly IFR, you have to have ADSB out. You don't technically have to have ADSB in. And then for your guys doing your private pilot check rides, you need to know where you're required to have ADSB out. And it's pretty much everywhere that there's a mode C that you have to have mode C. So inside the class Charlie, over the top of the class Charlie, inside the class Bravo and inside the Mode C veil for the class Bravo.
Over the top.
So
Class
Alpha,
Charlie?
Bravo, and Charlie, right?
Is there any altitude above Class Charlie, or is there like?
Double check me on this one. ADSB, you have to have it if you fly over the top of the class Charlie, correct? Yeah.
Why
So,
not with Bravo? Just
well, because Bravo,
Mode C
you're
veil.
inside the Mode C veil. So you have to have it too.
Gotcha.
The difference is in Bravo, the Mode C veil is outside the layers, so you have to have it under the layers. In in Class Charlie, you can fly under the Class Charlie and not have ADSB out.
It's above the ceiling at 10,000 feet. It says.
What's that?
Does above the
Mode C
ceiling.
veil have a ceiling?
Yeah.
Up to 10,000. And at 10,000, anything above 10,000 feet, don't you have to
So
have
above the
ADSB?
ceilings and within the lateral boundaries of Class B or Class C airspace area upward to 10,000 feet MSL.
Up to 10,000 feet? Okay.
And
Because above
But I think
that,
above 10,000 feet, everybody has to have
Your IFR,
so it's surely just above. Okay.
So it's just, see that?
So, the simple answer is if you're above the Class Charlie,
Yeah.
you have to have it. And now, if you double check, you can fly under the shells of the Charlie with no ADSB. You can't fly under the shells of a Bravo
Because you're,
without ADSB because you're inside the Mode C veil.
God.
I don't know if there's an upper limit to the Mode C veil, to be honest.
I
But
guess it has to stop it.
at 10,000 feet, well, yeah, you'd have to
Because
start.
it Alpha, you have
Is
to.
the Mode C veil depicted on section?
Yes.
Yes.
It's
Mhm.
It's a per
But everybody above 10,000 feet has to have Mode C and Class and ADSB out.
Anyway,
So everything.
not classical.
Oh,
there is no class.
there's no class golf.
There is some Class Golf above
Above 10,000.
10,000.
But it's pretty
mountains.
rare, though. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, I gotcha.
See, but you guys are all going down the right thought process. You work through all these things. All right,
Mode C veil does extend vertically to 10,000 feet.
that's where it stops.
Does it every time?
Yeah, well, because at 10,000 feet, all the rules change.
Yeah.
But Denver is probably above 10,000 feet.
There's a 12,000 foot, their Class Bravo extends to 12,000 feet.
So their Mode C veil would go with it. So, just a weird. So Denver's a good example. If you ever want to know like an extreme, go look at Denver because it's a Bravo and it sits up at a mile high. So it's at
What's
6,000
the
feet.
difference between Alpha airspace and Mode C veil? Is there?
Between Alpha airspace,
Yeah.
Alpha airspace is everything above flight level 180
180. Yeah.
to flight level 600. That's all Class Alpha, and Class Alpha requires that you fly
That's
IFR. It's the only way to fly it.
So there is a gap.
So between 10 and 18,000 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have Class Echo and Golf.
Well, this should
Are there any aircraft we're likely to fly that is
Where's the
capable
Mode C veil
of
on this?
going above Class Alpha?
Probably not. Unless you're in the
Military.
military.
It's the red.
Yeah, there's some funny stories about people requesting flight level 600,
And the ATC is like, if you can get there,
descending to flight level 600. SR-71 Black.
But see,
Yeah.
And the
You guys
YouTube.
see the video of that? That's not a video.
Mode has
It's-
a C.
Okay,
It's not class.
It's not class.
It's class B.
are we good? Yeah, Mode C veil is not Class Charlie, and that is important to understand. It means you have to have a Mode C transponder to operate inside there, unless you have an exception.
But you don't need Mode C for Class Charlie, but you do need ADSB
You need Mode C to operate inside the Class Charlie.
inside, but not above.
And it's usually
So
You need-
you do need it above.
In and above,
Okay,
but not under.
not under.
Also, in 91.216, it talks about ATC transponder and altitude reporting equipment and use the Mode C.
There you go. And ADSB has a separate channel.
91225
19.
ADSB.
So for both of your check rides, both your private and your instrument, these are things you need to know, and ADSB probably will come up because it's newer. All right. All right. Air traffic control clearance. They'll always give you a clearance limit. It's how far. It's where you're cleared to. A route, an altitude, a frequency, a transponder, and a transponder code, and a void time. All right. The clearance limit is usually the destination airport, but not always. Sometimes you'll get a partial clearance, and they'll tell you to expect further clearance at a certain time. It is very, very important that you write down that time, because if you lose calm, when you get to that clearance, you will hold until that expect further clearance time, and then you continue from that point along what your filed route of flight was going to be. Does that make sense? And we'll talk about lost comms again at another time. All right. So cleared from Stockton Metro, direct to Manteca VOR. I threw this slide in here because I want you to start getting used to this idea of copying down craft. So if you look at your little notepads in ForeFlight, one of them is a craft notepad. Clearance limit, route, altitude, frequency, transponder code. And then I add void time. We will fly a lot off of airports that are not towered. And if you call to get a clearance, they will give you a void time. And usually they give you 3 times back to back. A void time, what the current time is, and then a time to call them by. So if you don't get off, call us by this time. Because when they do a void time, they lock down that entire airspace. You guys were kind of talking about this earlier. Yeah, nobody can come in or out until you've gotten back on the radio with ATC and they have confirmed that you've successfully departed.
Gotcha.
All right.
What would a radio call like that be like?
So here, for example, we would call on a phone and say that I'm in Bravo Tango. I'd like to open my IFR clearance. And they would say, you are cleared to Coeur d'Alene via as filed, fly and maintain 8,000 contact Spokane Center, or Seattle Center on whatever the Seattle Center frequency is.
123.95.
123.95. Squawk 2233. Void if not off by 0320 Zulu. Time now 0317 Zulu. If not off by 0320 Zulu, call us by 0325 Zulu. And then if we take off, as we're climbing out of the bowl here, there's a little bit of time where you can't get a hold of Seattle Center. It's not terribly long, but
About 6,000 feet you might be able to.
6,000 feet. So then at 6,000 feet, I would just be Seattle Center. This is 733 Bravo Tango off of Boundary County at 6,000 feet. And they would come back with something like 733 Bravo Tango, Seattle Center, radar contact, 10 miles south of Boundary County at 7,000 feet because I'm still climbing. You know what I mean? And then I'm supposed to confirm that they have the right radar return. Sometimes you'll get a squawk ident. So you push the ident button. Sometimes they just give you that you're good. And then they'll say, they may give you something like, okay, climb and maintain 10,000 feet. Off you go. When they give you altitude, they'll always give you an initial altitude and then an expect the new altitude. It's usually 10 minutes. And when we get to copying clearances, I'm going to teach you some tricks that make copying them easier. But this is the same order. If you're flying along and they give you a routing change, prepare to copy, you're going to write the same thing down, CRAFT. You don't need a void time because you're already flying. Okay? But craft, that's definitely on your list to learn and memorize and understand. And then because we fly out here all the time, we're going to do V, craft V. All right, so there's a clearance. Basic VFR weather minimums. Why do we as IFR pilots need to know the basic VFR weather minimums?
Because
File a flight plan.
What's that?
So we know to file a flight plan, IFR flight plan.
So you don't have to?
So we know when.
So we know, okay, we know when we have to.
so you know where the traffic's going to be if you're going to have VFR traffic up at that point.
So you'll know if there's going to be VFR traffic out bopping around doing stuff to you. I will tell you as an IFR pilot, if I'm going somewhere, I file. It keeps you it gets you routed through restricted areas. It gets you more direct routings most of the time. It guarantees that you get flight following. They don't call it flight following. They call it opening your flight plan. But
They can't tell you that.
they can't tell you no. And you won't bust a TFR. You won't bust a restricted area. You won't get hit by somebody in a MOA.
What's the reasoning for not doing a flight following or flight plan? Is there any real reason why you'd want to not do it?
Sometimes in really congested areas, sometimes it can take a long time to get off the ground. We will talk about, there's one trick that you can use in rural areas. If it's VFR, you can file your flight plan, take off VFR, and then call up and open the flight plan in the air. But until they open your flight plan, you're on your own.
Okay.
Okay, and then when they give you the clearance, you have to follow the clearance. But, so, another reason, so flying in here very often, if you don't want to be rude to the citation that's trying to get in or out, if it's VFR weather, you can cancel your IFR flight plan when you're close to home, fly the rest of the way VFR, all right? But you have to know what the cloud clearances restrictions are.
So
All right.
if you can cancel.
Exactly, to know if you can cancel it. And then, to your point, it gives you an idea of how much crap you're going to run into. If you fly into Deer Park on a VFR day in the last, so I just happened to fly over the other day, and there were 9 planes in the pattern. It's a good way to know if you're going to run into some train wreck. You know what I mean? And you are if it is VFR, you do not have priority even on an IFR approach. You could be coming in cleared on an IFR approach and be told, join the pattern, buddy.
Yeah, cleared for the visual.
Cleared for the visual. All right?
You're going to have to wait for us to land.
Exactly. All right. What's the big difference between class Golf and all the other classes?
It's not controlled.
That's the magic word. All right. And you can legally fly IFR if you have an IFR certificate and you're in an IFR equipped airplane in class Golf with no IFR flight plan.
Oh, that sounds awful.
It is a horrible, horrible idea. Don't do it.
So you have to be.
But legally, you can do it. Now, part of the reason this comes up is if you take off out of someplace like here, you are in uncontrolled airspace until you hit 700 feet. And that has to do with radar coverage and all kinds of things like that. All right?
So in other words, you basically have to be able to fly up until we had phones and things that made it easy to call.
Well, you had to be able to get off the ground somehow. But you would not fly 700 feet off the ground and try to get out into IFR. We used to come in and call on a landline. They would give you all your shot, and then you had to go run out, get the plane started. They would give you like 15 minutes to go taxi out. We tried to do this the other day. About a month ago. Callie and I tried to do it, and they told us, no, call us from a cell phone.
You're like, we just wanted to test it.
So you're screwed, Andrew. Get a phone.
I know.
You're going to hear that a few more times. All right.
Yeah.
1720. I got to pick it up a little bit here. All right. So Class G usually only exists very close to the ground. 0 to 700 feet AGL above most airports, some airports. 0 to 1200 AGL most other places. There are some exceptions, and you can find Class Golf up to 14,500 feet. All right. One of you I was in, and I found it on the old map charted in there, but that airspace has now been reclassified. It's now Class Echo.
So they had it on for one rotation.
Oh, really?
One rotation.
And you got it on the wall.
That's what we have there.
So,
I purposely installed that one.
okay. But, so, if you're going to find any more of that weird airspace like that, it will be in the west. And it will probably be in mountainous terrain. All right. So, Class G. We talked about this a lot. Those little faded lines, they're called vignettes. And so it helps if you have a word to use to describe it. Pink vignettes on the fuzzy side, 700-foot ceiling. On the sharp side, 1,200. There you go. All right, blue vignettes on the sharp side is 14,500 feet unless otherwise stated. And then they have little jagged zippery things if it's an unusual altitude. All right. Uncontrolled airports and uncontrolled airspace. You're sitting on one, but we're only uncontrolled up to 700 feet. So now you could take off out of here. You could go up to 700 feet, up to 600 feet AGL, level out, and go bebopping out. And somebody in this room may have done that the other day to go get somewhere. It's because we were trying to stay in the class golf so we could be 1 mile in clear clouds because Dave wanted to go get an airplane. So,
Nice.
all right.
I like it.
The term for that is scud running. It used to be fairly common.
I love power lines now.
Look, you know, it's not power lines that cause the problem now. Cell towers. There are so many cell towers that reach up like 300-400 feet that'll just kill you. All right. All right.
We need to go to Kansas.
So,
Do you ever see
all right, you always have controlled airspace within 4 nautical miles of an airway. So, and we talk about Victor Airways. So, but you can also have T routes now. You know what the difference between. So Victor Airways generally go from VOR to VOR. T routes are GPS based. You will now see T routes that are overlaid. Am I getting that right? Because what's the other one? Q routes? Q routes are at altitude, right? T or low.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you will now sometimes see T routes overlaid on a VOR. Any idea why they would do that on a Victor Airways?
either one to.
So what's the benefit of a T route, though?
You can check your VOR while you're flying GPS.
Well, that's something you can do.
In case the GPS system fails.
Actually, GPS can have lower altitudes than the T route, than the V routes, because you have to have guaranteed radio connection with both ends, and so T routes don't have that restriction. They just have to have satellite coverage, so they can sometimes make them substantially lower.
So because of the satellites being up in the air looking down instead of being on the ground looking.
Is there like R routes for VFR GPS?
What's that?
Is there like R routes for VFR GPS?
Same.
T routes.
But that's for IFR GPS. Isn't the VFR GPS designated as something else? That's specifically.
There are some visual routes for GPS that are specifically for the GPS routes that are specific. I'd have to go look some stuff up because the big one you see is T routes, and T routes can be used by VFR pilots.
There is Q routes also.
Those are higher altitude. All right. So here we go. This is just another picture of uncontrolled airspace. All right. So class G. 0 to 1,200 feet, follows the terrain. It's AGL. All right. So why does this airport have the lowered 700-foot class Echo above us?
Because it has the pink thing around it.
Okay, but why did they change the airspace designation? I've told at least 2 of you.
Did it have to do with the RNAV in?
Yes.
Instrument approach. Because we have an instrument approach, they control the airspace further down. If you look, Coeur d'Alene has a pink dashed line around it. What does that mean?
It's a surface.
Special.
Echo to the surface.
Oh.
Okay, and you can get special VFR. Why do we not need special VFR in class golf?
We do not have a tower to.
Because we already had special VFR.
Because we're in class golf, you can fly 1 mile in clear clouds during the day anyway.
And that's what special VFR gets you.
Yep.
Well,
right.
special gets you GS space.
No, class gets you 1 mile in clear of clouds.
Can you take
Special
off
VFR.
with a special VFR?
Yes.
That's what it's for.
Even if the ceiling is like lower than
Yep.
1,000 foot?
Take off or land, you can get it during the day. You can get it with just a private pilot's license, right? And at night, you have to be IFR certified.
To be clear, I went flying a couple years ago with my instructor when it was really smoky, and we were barely 3 miles visibility. and that was frankly terrifying.
Well, because you're going to cover a mile in a minute and a half.
Yeah.
We only need 1 mile.
Why would you want to fly special vehicles?
You do it in an area where you really, really know the area well, and it's the best way to get in or out.
Or if you're just like us, you're staying in the pattern.
Sometimes,
You're
yeah.
never gonna hit. Unless we practice pattern work. Oh my God.
All right, I don't know. Have you guys ever seen this triangle before? So my suggestion would be Google it on YouTube. It is a way to learn and memorize the cloud clearances and visibility requirements for the different airspace. My Class G, 1 mile in clear clouds during the day, but you need 3 miles and 152 at night. 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, 2,000 feet lateral. All right. What was your question?
If there's an airport without the magenta vignette, it's Class G until 1200.
100% right.
But ours is Class G. It starts at Class E. Starts at Class E starts at 700.
Yes, because we're inside the magenta
But
vignette.
the edges of the magenta vignette, that's 1200.
Yep,
Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah.
that's what the cutoff line is.
Yeah.
The crisp side, because if you look at Coeur d'Alene, it's not just a nice round circle. There's a
Yeah.
It's got a little indent out of it.
Actually, not.
well, but so they got stuff to the surface, and then the 700 actually goes out around Coeur d'Alene, and then it makes a weird jog, and it goes around
It's like
Phelps Field and Spokane, and
It goes all around everything.
so all that. So yes,
And a lot of them are just circles.
yep.
Any airport.
All right, minimum altitudes. Okay, what's minimum safe altitude?
It depends.
It's whatever altitude you can make an emergency landing without any harm to persons or property.
Jesus, you have been studying. I can tell you. So yeah, all right. So that is the general definition, and if you look in the regulation, it says everywhere. Everywhere is where you can reasonably make an emergency descent and landing without causing undue harm to people on the ground.
Minimum safe.
All right. In mountainous terrain, or sorry, in a populous area, what is the minimum safe altitude?
1,000 above, 2,000 horizontal.
So, 1,000 feet above the highest thing within a 2,000 foot radius. All right, and learn to say it that way. You have to be 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a 2,000 foot radius of the aircraft. In other than populated areas, I'm saying that wrong too.
Other than congestion.
Other than congested areas, what's the
500 AGL and 500.
not AGL 500 feet above?
Sorry, above. The ground and above or away from people.
And in sparsely populated areas,
Just 500.
500 feet away from anything. All right. So like over water is always the example that you see.
And actually, it also it's in the second one there.
Mm-hmm.
It's over water is just 500 from people.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be 500 above water.
You can be touching the water.
Right.
You have to be 500 feet
From the boat.
straight line distance from any boats.
Yeah.
It's any person, dwelling, or person, structure, or vessel, I believe.
In sparse?
So a fence doesn't count.
What about in less than congested though? It has to be 500 feet above the ground,
500 feet above the highest obstacle.
and that includes you can't be 1 foot above water.
No, it's above ground. I looked.
Oh, is it AGL?
I think it's
Well,
above.
only AGL. So in sparsely, it's 500 away, like it is in the.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So you can't be on the water in less than congested areas because that's not 500 feet above.
you can. I think
You
that.
can, yeah, it's very specifically stated that you can. So it's other. It's congested areas, other than congested areas, and then there's actually a third sparsely
Feet above the surface. Yeah.
And other than congested, 500 away from
above the
objects of
surface.
water.
Okay.
Except of open water sparsely populated.
That's
areas.
Yeah, so
Except.
over.
Those
so over water is
cases,
basically
yeah,
considered as part of the populated area. That's why.
Yeah, because we don't have people that are living
Except
Then
like
you know
one guy on a boat who's fishing.
fish.
Yeah.
Okay, so now,
In Alaska, that doesn't happen, I guess. Over like
so we've done all
big
that.
boats. Yeah, little boats. But there's some boats out there that have, 80-foot things sticking up off the top of them when their riggers are up and all that. So
Yep.
it's like,
We kind of covered this. So where does the Class E airspace? We've talked about all this. Pink dash lines go to the surface. Pink vignettes, 700 AGL. Blue vignettes, there are 1,200 feet AGL on the shaded side, 14,500 AGL on the sharp side. Then the blue fence, you read it on the chart. And by the blue fence, talking about this little symbol here. All right.
And we'll have it notated by the blue kids.
Yep. It'll look just like that. Two different altitudes on either side.
Are they for you?
All right.
True for difference in altitude.
Where would you find a
class
blue
12.
vignette?
So the class 12 goes up to 6.
So they've taken them off a lot of the
So
charts.
yeah,
they're on this one over here a lot because it's old. Like he's got it right there.
okay.
this one's got runway 1 accordingly.
Well, that would be.
the blue vignette for private.
The silver right there.
That'd be smart to know.
Silverwood's not even there anymore.
You can find it in the chart if you ask.
Okay.
It'll ask you though.
Not blue.
Oh, we're doing all right, I think. So, Center, TRACON, and RAPCON. All right. TRACON is terminal radar approach control, and RAPCON is radar approach control. You will never hear those terms. You will just hear approach, and approach is also departure. They tell you contact departure. It's the same frequency and same people as approach. All right. And then center sits on top of the whole mess. Center covers the entire United States, and you go from center sector to center sector to center sector. We already saw this picture. This kind of goes to what Nicole was talking about. 6,000 feet is not like a magic line. They cut them up into weird shapes, and it has to do with the amount of traffic that goes through, what kind of terrain is involved, what kind of radar coverage they have, all sorts of different things. So if you're flying around in that 5,000 to 10,000 foot zone, you may get passed around quite a bit, which I need to redo so we talked about non-tower departure. You can either call on a radio. Sometimes, if you're close enough, you can just call them on the radio. If not, you call them on what's called a remote communications outlet, an RCO, and that is like a little radio that's on an airport that's hooked to a landline, and you call. Some of them you used to have to, like, when you called, they would actually dial a phone. Those are kind of going away. Telephone, if you pull up here, I think it gives you a phone number, doesn't it?
I think it does, yeah.
Yep. So,
Well, I know I've called them before.
yeah, clearance delivery. So, 65 Sierra.
Yeah, 253 351
Yeah, if you go on the info tab where it says clearance delivery, that phone number, that's who you would call. In fact, nice thing on ForeFlight is if you pair it Bluetooth to your headset, you can go do your run up, get everything done, be ready to go, dial it, and be sitting there with the engine turning. Because what used to suck was you'd get a clearance and then you go try to start your plane, and for some reason the plane doesn't want to start because, I don't know, it's cold or it's hot or it's Tuesday. But so anyway, now not everybody will have clearance delivery. If you get desperate, you can also call 1-800-WX-BRIEF and tell them you're trying to open your clearance, and they'll get on the phone and get you open. If you ever get on the ground and you needed to close the clearance, all right, sometimes you won't be able to call them back on the radio because you'll just get below their, like here, you wouldn't be able to call Seattle Center back on the radio. That's another reason to cancel in the air if it's VFR, because it closes the flight plan. When you land, call that Seattle Center number back and say, hey, I need to close my IFR flight plan. I am safely on the ground at Boundary County. If you don't have that phone number, call 1-800-WX-BRIEF and tell them you need to close out your flight plan. Sometimes you'll be flying into a place and they know they have trouble and they know the number's not published. They will give it to you while you're flying. So you need to be prepared to copy it down. All right. So this is, somebody said whenever we fly IFR, we're going to be in center. No. You can fly in what's called Tower En Route Control, or TEC. We don't have it around here, but you could do it in like in the Seattle area. You could probably get tech. So specifically, your flight cannot enter center-controlled airspace if you're going to fly a tech route. So they're going to be lower altitudes, generally like 8,000 feet and below. They're pre-designated routes, and they're found in the chart supplement. Okay? I have never, ever used one of these. Ever. Because either if you're flying those kinds of things, you're usually doing IFR, and I've never flown into spaces like this. So, in Southern California.
That's what I did.
Yeah, but so if you look, these are all approach controls. Burbank, LA, San Diego. I don't even know what SXC is. But the bottom line is, you're following a route like this one here, and you may go from SBA to OXR to LAX to LGB to SNA to SAN. You never get up into center's airspace. You specifically have to request those routers, all right? And they're found in.
So I'm glad I didn't practice there.
What's that?
I'm glad I didn't practice there.
Well, the thing is, though, you learn a lot of things that you don't learn here.
Yeah.
Out here, you learn how to fly out of places that don't have towers and different things. I learned to fly in flatland. I had to come out and learn how to deal with mountains. So, all right.
Sounds so weird.
So,
What is flash?
all right. So, preferred routes. And I wrote on here official and old school. All right. Officially, in the chart supplement, there were routes that are published in there that if you want to fly from, say, Spokane to Seattle, there will be a preferred route. And if you follow that, you're probably going to get it. Smaller airports aren't always on those preferred routes, so then what you got to do is find like two bigger airports, connect the dots, and then you can try to request that preferred route with the modification of your little airport that you're leaving from and the little airport you're going to. The unofficial but super useful method is ForeFlight. When you put in a route in ForeFlight, up on the right-hand side, it says suggested.
Mm-hmm.
I've never actually used that function before.
It is awesome. For IFR, it's awesome. If you use that ForeFlight or recommended routes, all you do is you can literally put in your departure and destination, and then it'll give you like 1 or 2 or 5 or 6 recommended routes. The trick to those is when you read through them, you want to see if they're at the altitudes you were intending to fly, and if they're for an aircraft that's similar to yours. By similar, I mean, is it a single engine piston? You know, you do not want to be grabbing the 747's route. All right. But if you pick one of those routes, I have yet to not get the route I asked for. Even sometimes I'll pick it and then tweak it a little bit to make myself happier. But because you're following the general route that they want you to go, the center computer says, yep, that route will work, and they give it to you. All right? Both improve the odds of hearing the phrase cleared as filed, which when you're copying your clearance, that's the phrase you want to hear. That said, if they give you something else, it's not a big deal. All right. Low altitude preferred IFR charts, IFR routes. They look just like this. San Francisco to the Oakland Metro Air. From San Francisco. Oh, good Lord. These aren't even easy to read. But so Victor 27 to VTU to Victor 299 to Sadie to Victor 107 to LAX. And that's effective from 1400 UTC to 08 UTC. You can still find these. It's much, much easier to use the recommended route from ForeFlight. You may see questions like this on the test. Is there a preferred route from here to there? They have to give you something to look at. Oh. Right. And I skipped one slide back here somewhere. Oh, I'm filing an IFR flight plan. Okay, this flight plan is the old school flight plan, and technically they have completely gone away. This was the FAA flight plan. I say technically because a lot of knee boards still have these boxes in this same order. And if you ever have to do a pop-up while you're flying along, if you give them that information in that order, they will fill it out and you'll be fine. Now we use the ICAO flight plan. The only real trick to the ICAO flight plan is in all this equipment information. Every airplane that you fly, that you're going to file IFR, the biggest thing you got to do is sit down and go through and fill that information out before you ever get there. When we get to writing and filing flight plans, we will actually take, what was it?
698.
698, and we will walk through what the codes are so that you can put it all into your ForeFlight. And you will never enter it again, but you do need to be able to talk to the examiner about why those codes are there and what they mean. The old school used to be super easy. If you had a GPS, you just slash golf. And there were a couple of other codes. I think slash Victor was if you had VOR and nothing else. There were a couple, but it was like one letter. Now it's like 16 letters that you end up putting in because you have to tell them how accurate your GPS is and if it can do en route navigation, if it can do terminal area navigation. So just understand that you will fill these out, but you'll end up doing them using ForeFlight. All right? And most of the DPEs grew up with this old school one. All right? When you fill out the flight plan, old school, so you used to have to call up 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF. Actually, it used to be horrible. You had to have the right phone number for where you were. But you'd call up and you would read them all of these blocks. And then you had to wait 30 minutes. And then your clearance might be in the system. You will all file on your iPads. It's just that simple. You're going to do your flight planning on your iPad.
Unless you don't have one.
If you're going to fly IFR today's day and age, you're going to want an iPad. We can make you do one, old school, where you call up the... Because it...
he'll go and buy an iPad.
Yeah, exactly. But you'll do your planning. You'll send it to flights. You will go through flights and clean it up to make sure that all the information is specific to the flight you plan to do, and then you'll submit it. There is nothing wrong with filing a flight plan and never opening it. If you don't open it, approximately 2 hours after your proposed departure time, it just gets deleted. Just never happened. Once you open the flight plan, it is essential that you close the flight plan. Because what happens if you don't?
Send emergency.
Yeah. You know what they actually do? They call the phone number. The first thing they do is make a phone call.
They like delete your flight plan.
Hey, are you alive? And then, if they can't get a hold of you at the number that you put on your flight plan, they will call the airport manager at your expected destination and any alternates you filed.
And we will go look around the ramp for you.
To see if your plane's hit. Right. And then they start launching things.
Don't do what I did on my first cross country after I got my license and got home late and turned off my phone and had them and Dave calling me for about an hour before I woke up and remembered.
You filed a VFR flight plan and didn't close it?
Yes.
Yeah, so
I first cross country after getting my pilot's license.
Yeah. So IFR, the problem is they will keep the airspace closed. And so they'll be super mad.
Wherever you were last, right? Or where
Yep.
you think you were last.
Where they think you were and where you were going, and any alternates.
So you basically close down 3 airports.
Well, no, 2 typically.
So if you were going to Spokane,
Where you're landing, and
would you close down Spokane if you were going to Spokane?
in theory,
So
don't
your
do it.
instructor doesn't find you and kill you.
So
Yeah.
if you want to delay your
Okay.
flight coming in.
So there we go. We're going to have a whole other class about filling out IFR flight plans. But what you understand is those go into the system, and then when you open the flight plan, then you're part of the system. Everything you're talking about. When you do a VFR flight plan, which do you teach them the VFR ICAO flight plans for VFR, or do you do the old school FAA?
So mostly on ForeFlight,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think with these guys that we did that.
Okay.
We got flight following and all that stuff.
We only did it. We did it once in the plane.
Wait, you guys
No.
do flight plans?
We only did it. We scheduled we did one with Seattle Center.
No,
Right?
you've done route planning, but you've never filed a flight plan.
I guess we never did.
So you
Flight plan for every.
you just go to that briefing page and then at the bottom it says file.
And then it
you
just
file
sends it?
there. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Cool.
And
So,
then you
and
can
VFR, I
check
think you can
it.
open and close on your
What does
iPad.
that do?
Yes.
What does that do when you file a flight? It just makes everybody aware of where you are and where you're going.
Yeah, it
So
makes so
put-
that
It puts it in the system. So this is something that's important. Your route on a VFR flight plan is not sent. It's not visible by the controllers. They don't. They just know what your departure was and what your destination is. Because that's not the point of it. The point of a VFR flight plan is for like search and rescue after the fact, things like that. Okay.
But IFR.
On IFR, everything you put in there gets sent to the controllers, except all those crazy ICAO codes. Nope, all they get /golf. That you have GPS. But understand that if filing the flight plan, you need to put it in at least 30 minutes in advance. But you don't have to tune that time down to like the nanosecond, because it stays in the system for about 2 hours after. So you have a 2.5 hour window. I have never had a problem when and when you file a ForeFlight, it'll even come back and tell you what your expected route is. So, and you know what, I stand corrected. I have had a route change, but ForeFlight told me what the new route was, and it's always been correct. It was always the route I ended up getting. So, all right.
So we're up with.
So, any questions about tonight? So,
Was this catch up from the week we missed, or was it, did we catch up?
no, I still have a little more catch up to do, but I don't think I'm going to have to do an extra week. So I think we'll be fine.
Kind of breaking right now.
What's that? So we just,
really kind of skipped the break and got moving through it.
well, you guys, I had a whole bunch of you getting ready to go to check rides and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely, you will get holding questions.
Okay.
So this week, after you finish your check rides, start looking at holds and be prepared to just get a hold thrown at you and see if you can pull up your iPad, draw it on your iPad, get it going the right direction, those kinds of things. Okay? And then history of ATC, not super important, but understanding that you're going to, like at a towered field, you'll go from clearance delivery, you'll talk to ground control, you'll go to tower, you'll take off, you get past to departure, you'll climb up, you'll get into center space, you'll fly in through center, you'll get handed off several times in center, then you'll get passed off to an approach controller, and you might go through several approach controllers. So like if you go into Seattle, I've gone through Seattle and had 6 frequency changes crossing from one side to the other because their approach areas are really small.
Mm-hmm.
All right? But just understand that you go from approach to approach to approach to approach. And then they'll pass you to another tower controller, who will then pass you to a ground controller, and then you go park. All right? So that's your intro to the big system. We're going to go through this several more times, because when we talk about, so next week we're going to talk about FAR aim. That's going to go super, super fast. You guys are going to be basically familiar with it. And then we'll start talking about flight planning and departures, and then we'll talk about en route, and then we'll talk about arrivals, and then we'll go back into flight planning.
Okay.
Cool?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Don't forget to turn off your video.
I did have one more thing to tell you guys thought of it while we were talking. Nicole maybe has told you guys this.